All right, we are going to see how this works today. I tried something different. So hello everyone, and welcome to this Saturday's live stream. I believe this is our 115th live stream. Someone suggested I put the number in the title, but I don't know. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. So what I wanted to do was try out some different lighting behind me. So the tank looks horrible, color-wise, because that's my refugium light. I borrowed the XHO and I put it over the Reef because I was trying to see if it looked blown out or not. And I feel, to the eye, it's not pretty here in person. So this is it with just white lights. And it's not even really white, it's kind of a yellow. And that's why you're seeing it that way. Now if I add one XHO on there, that gives us a little bit of blue, but I almost feel like it's too much. So, and then if I try it one more time, this would be the other XHO. So now it has that weird blue washed out look. This right here is getting highlighted. It's too much light. But I don't know. I always want to look nice in the background. I always feel like it doesn't look good. So I'm thinking about that way right there. So we got the white in the front, the blue in the back. And I know that you guys are watching the live stream, and occasionally I'll make a video and you get to see the video of what the tank looks like. But for today, I believe I can add a photograph here. Oh, nope, that didn't work. Just a second here, sorry. Let's try that one more time. I'm looking for... Let's try this, see if this works. Here is a picture of the Reef from a few days ago. And so that's what it looks like in real life to the naked eye. And someone came over yesterday to pick up his order, and he said, "You're right, the tank looks so much better in person." So I just wanted to kind of give you guys, a visual. And I'm thinking what I might need to do, is go ahead and roll out some kind of clip of the tank once a month. Maybe on the 10th, because that's the anniversary month. Every single month that goes by on the 10th, I try to take a full tank shot like this one. And that way I can showcase the Reef for what it is. And it gives you a nice video. I don't know if I'll narrate. I don't know. Maybe I can do something where I just film the tank and you just get to see the tank in action in 4K with that month's updates. And then after the updates are done, then we'll go back to our regular scheduled stuff. I don't know. I'm always have ideas, but then it comes down to, am I actually going to do it? And, well, there you go. So that was something I wanted to show you guys. But yeah, I think that white in the front, blue in the back kind of works for this. I borrowed the refugium light specifically because I didn't want to spend the money on a white XHO in case it didn't work out. And I believe the newest well, there's always new stuff coming out. So who knows? I might even have the ability at some point to dim them down and kind of find that sweet spot where the tank looks right. But in a way, I always feel like the background looks kind of messy, and I wish that it looked prettier instead of being, kind of blurry and the wrong coloration. So we'll see how that looks. I'm kind of watching. I see kind of some flickering happening too. I'm not sure if that's going to be an ongoing disaster or not. It could be just the camera's adapting to that bright coral behind me, which is a cactus pavona, in case you're wondering what it is. All right, so we've got a couple things to talk about. I wanted to talk about the magazines. So first of all, 5 people from today's live chat will be chosen. They've got to be in the US to win this, and you will be chosen for a Coral magazine. So Coral magazine is a magazine that I subscribe to, and I've subscribed to for many years. I've got a lot of issues of this magazine, and it's a great magazine that you should definitely be subscribing to learn a lot about this hobby. And if you don't have one, you can order it either as a publication, a book, a magazine, and it's, let's see if I can do this where you can see over my shoulder. So, of course, it's got some advertising, but it's the latest gear, and then it's got specific articles going into, see there's a lot of reflections here. This one's about brine shrimp. And then here's one about fish. And so this is just one issue, and then here's your card. And to subscribe, you can actually subscribe for a digital copy only, which costs less. and that way you can just download it to your tablet and you can read it, like, I guess, when you're on a plane or however you get your e-publications. I tend to like real hard copies. I can hold in my hand and flip through. The subscription is 6 issues a year, and I'm giving away 5 to 5 people. And Andrea's going to take care of who gets what. She's going to decide. And I hope that you guys enjoyed. It's going to be a random one from my pile here. I went through all of them last night. I've got a whole bunch of manila envelopes ready to mail them out. And so that is going to happen. So I wanted to let you guys know up front. Another piece of business that I need to remind you guys is when you're asking your questions, if you do @Milos Reef at the beginning, it will help me find your questions more quickly in the chat because there's a lot of things being said. And, okay, Dr. Sharon did not come on Monday like I expected, and so I wrote her a couple days later to say, you know, we missed an appointment, and she wrote me back and said, no, I was going to contact you on the 10th to schedule an appointment. So, she is coming on the next Wednesday. I think that's, I don't know, 19th? Something like that. And she's going to be here for Spock. And I mentioned, you know, I have 2 other tangs that have issues, and she said, for this visit, she's actually willing to look at 2 different fish, so I get 2 patients for the price of 1. And so we're going to have Spock looked at, and then she'll decide if she wants to look at the cold tang, which I mentioned in the 6-year anniversary video, or the yellow tang, the smaller one that always gets beat up, and see if there's anything that can be done to make them look healthier. But, you know, so that's kind of cool to find out I can add a 2nd fish to the house call. Price-wise, in case you're wondering, what does it cost? The house call visit is basically $500, including all of her time, the trip back and forth from Dallas, and it involves inspecting the fish, removing it, and anesthetizing it, or, you know, at least putting it to a milder sedation so it can be weighed and inspected and everything. It's really interesting, and it's a 3-hour visit. It's not like it's a quick house call, so this should be pretty cool. And so that is happening next Wednesday. It didn't happen last Monday. I just wanted to let you guys know. Okay, the next thing, or the main topic today, is talking about tank maturity. And I felt like that was a really important topic, so I'm going to kind of start this off with a story, and then we're going to devolve into the conversation about it. Oh, also, if I don't know if I need to actually say this out loud, but I'm going to do it anyway. Some people say, man, your live streams are much too long. And I would just like to remind you that anytime you're watching a live stream, the first 45 minutes or so is the topic in question. And then after that is the Q&A, which lasts hours. So if you're thinking, oh my God, that's so long, and you're just here for the first time, you don't have to watch the whole thing. I mean, you will learn all the way through. And there's a lot of things that I talk about that end up with an extra story or an extra nugget of truth that people are like, oh, I'm so glad I stuck it through to the end or to this point, you know. And some people hit the pause button and hit continue later. Some people are driving down the road listening to this show. Others are working on their tank and listening to the show. They're not actually just staring at the screen for hours on end as if it was, you know, Lord of the Rings or some other great movie. But let's talk about tank maturity. And so here's the story, first of all. I was over on Reef to Reef, which is a really good forum that lets you learn a whole bunch and communicate with a lot of hobbyists. And I'm on there. I've been a member there for several years and, you know, a long time. And I went to a person's thread. I'm not going to call them out because I don't want to be negative. I just want to tell the story. If you can figure out who it is, that's fine. It's not like it's a secret. It's published on a forum where the entire world can see it, whether they're logged in or not. But the point is, this happened in 2016. The person bought a tank. They did all their research, and they decided they wanted to spend a lot of money on really good gear. So they bought themselves a Reef Savvy tank. Then Reef Savvy makes beautiful glass rimless tanks that are, you know, they're just gorgeous. They are pretty, I guess they are probably the best of the best when it comes to tank builders in the United States. And I never hear bad stories about Reef Savvy. I've never heard of one leaking or bursting. Now, they're shipped in a crate. And the crate is carefully built, the tank is put inside, and then they put their logo on the side. And the customer, as well as I, love the crates. We think the crates are really cool. And he had decided he wanted to use the crate as the official stand for the tank and keep that crate look so it kind of keeps the brand visible. And so to do that, he had to take the box itself and he had to reinforce it so it could handle the weight of the tank on top. And he went to a lot of trouble to make it look great. And then he stained it and he varnished it, and he made it so it was waterproof. And then fast forward a few weeks, and he got his new sump in, and the sump didn't fit the crate. Because when he measured the inside of the crate, he didn't take into account the reinforcements that were stealing space. So then it was a question of what to do, and he spent, I don't know, I think it was like a week or 10 days deciding how to handle it. He thought about removing the back. He thought about cutting a hole through the bottom and lowering the sump down, or putting the stand on top of the sump, and then it would be low enough for good clearance to reach in there and work on things. But finally he overcame it by just removing the back, installing the sump, putting the back on, and now he had a tank and he had a sump and he had the equipment inside there. He added the sand and the rock and the water. And then it wasn't shortly thereafter he was talking about these new fish that he'd added and some kind of, and an itty-bitty clam. So I thought, okay, that's kind of cool. And I'm watching the dates. And I think this build thread started in October 2016. And then within a matter of a few weeks, it turned out that something went wrong and he lost a couple of fish. And, so he posted, bad news, guys, this fish didn't make it. And then, he said, hey, I just got this in. It was a new thing. And he hooked up that piece of equipment. And then he was like, oh no, this fish got attacked by 2 fish. And so I've rescued it, and it's now in a little quarantine box to protect it and hopefully let it heal up and get better. And then, he would people were like, oh, that's great that you were able to save the fish. I think it's got this problem. I think it's got that problem. Maybe it'll be okay. And it started to perk up. It was eating. It was swimming around, but acting a little bit erratic and in the box. And then he decided, okay, you know what? I think I'm going to set it free tomorrow. And the next day it was dead. It didn't even make it. And he goes, guys, bad news. Another fish died. And then there was an equipment failure too. I think his tank got too hot. And, it reached like 88 degrees or something. And this was like in January. So it's about 3 months in, 4 months in. And it cooked a lot of livestock. And something survived. And the thread is 45 pages long. And I'm up to page 20 of this thread. And I'm just reading what's happening and seeing good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. And I was like, you know what that is? That's exactly what I talk about when it comes to tank maturity. Or really what it is, and people like to say, well, how long do I have to wait before I can add such and such? And, so I might say 9 months. It's an arbitrary number, but basically what I'm wanting is for the hobbyists themselves to have about 9 months of experience under their belt before they start adding some serious livestock, so that the livestock will live and thrive and grow and become beautiful. And instead, in the early months, you don't have that yet. You haven't gained that maturity. And because you don't have that maturity, you maybe aren't able to anticipate the things that can go wrong no matter how much homework and reading you've done. And that is just something, it's basically the school of hard knocks, and you have to survive it. And unfortunately, some creatures in our care may not survive it because of that lack of foresight. So when I ask you to please take your time, do your research, read more, that doesn't mean read more today and now you can add the livestock tomorrow. I'd rather you give yourself a few more weeks to gain the knowledge, to bring in more time in how you're watching the tank and observing how it responds to various dosing treatments you're doing. Because there's a lot that happens in the first 9 months of a new tank for a new hobbyist. And I'm sure if I went back to my original stuff in 1997, I might have sounded the same way. I might have said, hey guys, I got a tank, it's got a piece of live rock, oh my god, that was expensive, and look at my adorable clownfish. And then, 3 months later, you'd hear me say, oh my god, this hair algae is getting out of control, what do I do? See, it happens to all of us. We all live through it. So if you're new and you haven't lived through it yet, I'm just asking you to really be patient about this one and try to avoid what you often see or what appears to be done more quickly by others. Because just because some guy said, hey, I set up a tank and a month later it was a thriving reef, that's not the standard. That's not how life works. That's not how biology works. It just means that a force of will made this happen, and now they are going to be teetering on the edge of success or failure constantly because they have really accelerated the pace. and we want to take our time. Just like this little guy right here. It's a little tiny baby Chihulu. It's not a grown-up that has lived through all the trouble. It's young and it's happy and it's got little hearts floating around everywhere. And we get super excited and we go to the fish store and we see things we want to buy. I get it. And there's tons of times where I was like, oh my God, I need that so bad. And there's been the time where I've done the impulse buy as well. And it comes down to, well, how successful was I? Did I keep it long term? Did it only last a matter of days or weeks? See, if you're buying things and you're just trying stuff out, you kind of are also saying that your money is disposable. Because not only did a life get snuffed out, you've also lost 60, 80 bucks, 100 bucks because, you know, it didn't go right, maybe because of a lack of knowledge. So it's about personal maturity. It's about tank husbandry maturity. And we literally hold the lives of every animal we put in the tank in our own hands, and everything relies on us. If we don't feed it, they starve. If we don't keep up with water quality, they wither out. If we don't, you know, I don't know, I'm trying to think of all the things. If we don't clean our gear and something fails because we ignored it, things are going to, you know, stop running, which will in course affect the tank, which could in time actually be detrimental, especially if you don't catch it early on. And there's so many things that can go wrong on a reef tank. The saying that I heard a long, long time ago, I have no idea who said it, but the saying is still true. Nothing good happens fast in a reef tank. And usually it's those little things that, you know, for example, you guys know I love live rock. I love hitchhikers. I like those little creatures, and I like watching them grow. And if I come across something really cool on a piece of live rock, I'm not the first guy to scrape it off and rip it off and burn it with fire. No, the opposite. I'm like, that's cool. Let's see what it does. And, you know, occasionally there was something that was not good. But even then, it wasn't the end of the world. And given time, I was able to solve it. For example, and I'm not talking about outright pests. I'm not talking about like a worm that eats all your snails. That has to go. But for example, I had these adorable little tube worm feather dusters, and they had like a little brown tube that was like paper thin and, you know, super easy to mush. And the worm would pop out this little white feather duster that would just twirl around in the water. And they're very small. I mean, itty bitty little guys, maybe 3/8 of an inch wide, just really small. And I ended up at one point having thousands of them. They were everywhere in my tank. And a guy came over and says, Mark, I bet you can't take a picture of your tank without including one in at least, you know, in every shot. There's no way. They're everywhere. And I kind of looked at the tanks like, yeah, he's right. There really are too many. And I started ripping them out by the fistful and getting rid of them, or giving them to other people, you know, whatever I did. But I had way, way, way too many. And sometimes you will end up with a lot of stuff because of your husbandry. Like, for example, the vermitid snail, which is it's a worm in a tube that throws out a web. And the web is what it catches food on, and then it uses its mouth to inhale the web a little bit at a time to get the bits of food it captured. And so usually what happens is you feed your tank, and these little webs appear. And they kind of go out into the current, and they stick to nearby corals and irritate those corals. And people say, hey, what is this thing, and how do I get rid of it? And we, of course, tell them, break it off, put glue over the hole, take a dental tool and scrape it out of the hole, add bumblebee snails, you know, put in hermit crabs, you know, all these different approaches. But the thing is that most people have 1 or 2 or 10 of them, but occasionally I have that person that has 10,000 of them in their tank. And it's unbelievable. They're just everywhere. And you're like, how did it ever get to this plague proportion? And at that point, it's so much work to clean it up. They have to basically either take out one rock at a time and manually remove every bit of trace of that off of it, or they have to buy all new live rock. That was because the conditions in the tank were perfect to keep those guys thriving and multiplying on an exponential rate. And most of us don't want anything exponential in our tank. Nothing. I mean, I can't think of one thing you want in your tank besides pods that you want millions of. You know, even if you have acropora and you love it, you don't want millions of acropora. You want really pretty colonies. So you might want 10 or 15 awesome colonies in your tank, or you might only have room for 5. But to have a million would be wall-to-wall acro. There's no room for flow. There's no room for light to penetrate, and it all goes downhill. So, you know, we couldn't do that. But If you are trying to have some mushrooms, you don't want 1,000 mushrooms. If you are trying to have some zoanthids, yeah, you might want hundreds and hundreds of those because they're beautiful. But that's, a different topic. But like I said, most of the time, the things we want a few of. We don't want a bajillion. So what happened? Why is my husbandry different from Joe Schmo, who has 1,000,000 vermitids? What is he putting in his tank that I'm not, that's feeding these guys so that they're so prolific? And what can he do to reduce that and avoid it? So first of all, when you do have some kind of a pest like that, you're going to want to remove them as soon as possible before they can spread. And that is something that even I don't jump on. There's times where I see a problem, I'm like, and I just kind of let it go, and I kind of watch, and I see what happens, and I'm like, yeah, I really should have handled that. But most of the time, I don't have that kind of situation, and I guess it's just because I'm not broadcast feeding as much as Joe Schmo was doing, for example, and he was really good at it. So that is one example of husbandry, and it comes into that maturity. And I also feel like over the 9-month magic number that I spit out, which, great. So we say, what is that, 270 days? If you wait that long, you can pretty much, you can now say your tank is mature and you can add such and such. There's that, but there was also 270 days of you working on that tank every single day and getting to recognize what it's doing, what it's not doing, why did it do this, how can I correct this, catch a mistake early on before there's a bunch of livestock that can suffer. And that could even be something as simple as adding a controller to your tank, dialing in your heaters more closely because you didn't think about how the seasons change the temperature of the house, which affects the temperature of the tank. You have to live through some of this. So we want to really get a good internal maturity or husbandry of our husbandry to where we can be better stewards of the reefs we're trying to set up. So I'm sure some people are going to come on here and they're going to totally disagree and say, no, you don't have to go to all that much trouble. You don't have to be that careful, and you can just go all in. You'll have a great time, and I did too. And you could have a great time, and it could go really well. Maybe. But there's a chance, and it's kind of good, that it's not going to go quite as swimmingly as you're hoping. And in that situation, then, things go south quickly, and you spend a lot of money trying to make corrections to bring it back on track. And that's something that we'd like to avoid if at all possible. Let me see. Okay, is there anything that can speed up tank maturity to move things along more quickly? I've always proposed that you use live rock. I know everyone buys dry rock. Everyone's scared to death of any kind of bug or worm or feather duster or sponge, and they just want bone rock put in their tank that has nothing on it, and then either they want sand or they don't want sand. I feel like sand is very important in a reef tank. There's sand in the ocean. When I go everywhere I go diving, there's always sand underneath my feet. It is not just rock. And so, while there are rock faces covered in coral, even in the niches you see sand, and there's critters in the sand. The sand is very beneficial. Not only does it give the tank a natural look, which yesterday Kevin was here and he says, man, this tank looks so natural to me. And, it's nice to hear. But the benefit of sand bed does a couple of things. Number one, it does help denitrify, especially if it's a deep sand bed. I like a 4-inch sand bed. Mine's actually a little shallower because it's been 6 years and I need to replenish. But if you can't have 4 inches of sand, if you can't stand the look and you're going with 2 inches, the top ½ inch is still full of microfauna that's good for your tank. It's beneficial. It's bugs, it's bacteria, there's worms, there's all kinds of cool stuff living in the sand. And without sand, you're not going to get those things. You're just not. They're going to be out in the wide, those same things would be out in the open on a bare bottom tank. Fish would see it and they'd snarf it up and it would be gone. And you wouldn't have the benefit of the entire ecosystem. You've basically dialed it to this ecosystem minus these 7 items, and I want to make it work. And that's not always how that works. There's a reason why there's a predator for everything in the ocean to keep a balance. And when one predator is missing, like for example lionfish in Florida, there's nothing that can stop the lionfish from spreading because their natural predator doesn't exist in Florida. And so they have hundreds of thousands of lionfish in the ocean that don't belong there, that are eating all the native tiny mouth-sized fish in Florida, and it's really decimating their reefs down there, their waters. It's terrible. And they lay, 200,000 eggs at a time. How are you ever going to catch up with that? So they do these, lionfish derbies. Now the humans have become the predators, but they're not predators every week. It's like an annual event. Not great. And unfortunately, lionfish are finding their way into brackish water. One was discovered, which is insane. And, the more they spread, the more we're going to lose a very important part of the ecosystem. Because those little fish that the lionfish devoured were also using corals as homes. Lionfish don't. And, they bring food in, they poop on the corals, the corals grow. When those little fish are missing, the corals decline, the corals die, it becomes dead, it becomes skeletons, it becomes algae. And, then you still have some lionfish floating around looking for one more fish. So you see the ecosystem isn't balanced. Okay, another benefit of a sand bed is that it provides a reflection of light. So you're buying these expensive lights, you're shining them down on your sand, the light is bouncing off the white sand and coming back up the underside or the sides of your coral and giving it light from that side. So you have light coming from above, light coming from the side, and coming from beneath to some degree. And to eliminate that, you basically kind of create like a black hole on the bottom, because it's just glass, and the light just kind of goes down and has nowhere really to bounce, and it just kind of penetrates through. And so you lose that. And then the third reason for a sand bed that I like is you don't see detritus blowing around the bottom of the tank. And see, that's the biggest point most people want with a bare bottom tank, is to say, I want to have a tank that has no sand so I can crank up the flow and I can put whatever I want in the tank. And there's always detritus blowing around. And listen, I was just cleaning out my sump last weekend when I took out my Clarisy and completely disassembled it, reassembled it, cleaned it, filmed it. It's ready to do my review that I told you I was hoping to do last week, didn't have time. And there was a bunch of detritus under the Clarisy. So I vacuumed it all up, got it out of the sump. I used that VCA vacuum nozzle attachment that I love, and vacuumed it all out. Sump looked good. I reached behind me and got the little stand and put it back in the sump. I reached behind me to get the Clarisy, and when I looked back, there was some detritus under my little stand. I was like, just clean that out. Where did that come from? And it's like that in a bare bottom tank. You can have all the flow pushing it to one corner, and you can once a week siphon it out, but within minutes or hours, you're going to see some blowing around. It's never going to look pristine like a museum quality exhibit. It's life, and it's dirty, and there's stuff. And the sand bed kind of masks that a little bit. So you don't have to see detritus blowing around or creating this hill in the corner. It just kind of blends in. And then, if you're really concerned about it, you can do the gravel vac and siphon your sand bed from time to time. I don't. I just have a cleanup crew, and I don't. And you guys know I have some nitrate. So last I checked, my nitrate was around 30. I don't know that's coming from the sand bed. It could be. I have 5 tangs in my tank. It could be coming from them. All right, so would the sand bed increase or speed up the tank maturity? I'm going to say no, because when we set up a tank with live rock and sand, we then put in live sand or cups of live sand from the fish store or from a local hobbyist to seed the sand bed, and we wait for that bacteria to work its way through the sand bed. So it's not really speeding along. It's still the same growth period of waiting for it to spread out and get into all the sand and allow your livestock to, the bacteria levels to increase, to adapt to the present bioload, and then you buy 3 new fish, and they're pooping, and the bacteria has to adjust again for the bigger bioload, and then you buy a coral, and nothing really changes, and then you get another fish, and then you get this thing that burrows through the sand and kicks it all up, and you're like a sand sifting goby. And that's changing the dynamics of the sand bed. So it doesn't really speed things up, but it sure looks better. The live rock speeds it up. The dry rock is the opposite. Everyone that wants to set up a dry rock, yes, you can do it. A lot of people have been doing it for a long time, but it takes longer for that stuff to become live, to become beneficial. All it is initially is a pile of rock, which is sort of like, to me, a bunch of steel and rebar that's ready for the sheetrock and the insulation and the windows and all the rest of the structure. It's just something to hold things onto, but it's not doing anything for your tank, and it's not going to do anything for your tank for a long time. Pouring in bottles of bacteria is not going to suddenly make the rock viable and and enriched and ready to handle a bioload. It just isn't. It's going to take time, and it could take about 9 months. And the reason I say 9 months again is because when you set up a brand new tank with white rock, it was bleached or it was put in peroxide or just arrived and you like the look and you put in your tank and it looked pretty white. In a matter of a few weeks, it starts turning brown. And then after a few more weeks, the brown seems to fade away and it turns green. And green seems to stick around for like a month or two. And then the green fades and it turns kind of red. And you're just like, ugh, I hate all these colors. What happened to my beautiful white rock? And then, they start thinking, should I pull it out and soak it? Should I put it in the sun? Should I garden hose it? Should I leave it alone? Yeah, what's happening is the rock is going through what we call the ugly phases. And it's just something you have to live through. You live through 3 or 4 of those ugly phases. And then finally, it has reached a certain level of maturity. And it starts to look like live rock. It's getting there. And like I said, after a few more months, it actually really looks like it. And you could have a hard time discerning one from the other. Something interesting about live rock versus dry rock, or let's say something interesting about dry rock versus live rock, is that dry rock is super light. So because it's dry, and you're getting a big box of it and it costs you nothing, like let's say it's $2 a pound. And so the old adage of like 1 to 1.5 pounds per gallon, that was with live rock. And I was just thinking the other day, someone mentioned how, well, I heard you need 2 pounds of rock per gallon. And I was thinking, that seems like a lot. And then I realized, wait, dry rock is super light. You could probably put in 4 pounds per gallon in your tank, and it still wouldn't look like much because it's not dense yet. It isn't loaded up with all the bacteria and the denitrification that happens within the rock because it's barren. So it would be lighter, and you might be putting in even more than I would, or not. You might choose to aquascape with less rock for the aesthetics, for the look. But rock being mature and being able to handle the bioload, sandbed having time to mature and to get ready for the bioload, and you recognizing your tank from a distance, measuring your tank every single week, you're getting to that pattern, that routine of always being on top of what's going on in your tank, goes a long way. And that's why it seems like those that had a tank a while longer, it seems so easy for them. They just seem to put in something and it lives. I put something in my tank and it dies so quick. What happened? Why does that happen to me? It's not fair. And I think it's that experience of living through the early months that kind of set the tone or set the bar. You start to realize, okay, I'm never going to make that mistake again, and I'm going to avoid this, I'm going to correct this, I'm going to change that. And when you go through all those different switches and adaptations, you become more mature. And that is what the whole point of this conversation was about. So it took me about 40 minutes to get there. But I hope that helps you, because, and so ultimately what I'm asking you to do, if you're new, if you're trying something you've never done before, don't put on the brakes, but take your sweet time. There's no race. No one's gonna be able to set up a tank and turn it into a tank of the month within a couple of months. And if anyone does do that, if anyone can pull that off and basically make something that looks stellar and they seem to come out of nowhere and it acts like they just did this a couple of months ago, it's rigged. In other words, they planted it to be perfect for a picture, and everyone's like, oh my God, what a great reef, where did this come from? And then, you never hear about that tank again. And that's a big problem for me as a person, because, I always want everyone to be truthful. And if you set up a tank and it's maturing for 6 weeks or 8 weeks before you even put in the very first piece of livestock, that's the right track. And then, you add in some livestock, and then we get to watch it grow over time, and you show January, June, August, January, and we can kind of see it growing. And what I really love is when people don't move the things around in the tank. And so as the things are growing, you can actually watch them get bigger and bigger in each shot. And that's just really, really cool for me to see the progress that you've made over time versus everything's getting changed up, and you see the rocks have moved, and you see our gorgonian, and now it's gone, there's a goniopore there, and now it's gone, and now there's an anemone there. And you're like, what happened to that other stuff? Where did it go? Because it's not in the tank, and possibly it died, during the whole getting more familiar with how the tank operates and becoming better in tune with your aquarium. So, I hope that big, long conversation helped. And I think now, Andrea, if you're listening, can you let me know if we've gotten our 5 people yet? If not, I'll repeat what I said at the beginning of this live stream. In the meantime, I have something I'm working on behind me over here. And it's for a customer. He ordered it a long time ago, and I had to design it from scratch. And I was really hoping to have it done by today, by the stream. But last night, 2 of the pieces I cut were the wrong size. The math didn't work right in my head, and I made a mistake, and I had to make a change. So it's not quite done yet. But so this right here is the backdrop that goes against a cabinet or a wall, and then you've got a fence that's 2 inches tall, and then this base is going on the bottom. And it's just gonna, and it's all made out of black acrylic. So this is gonna screw to a wall or inside a cabinet, and it's gonna allow someone to put their trident inside here, up high in the cabinet, and that way they will have a place to put it and not have to put it next to the sump or on the sump. They wanted this little box, so they asked me to make one, and so I made this guy, and it's almost done, and it'll be done by tonight, but it's, sorry, I'll just be posting a picture on Instagram of it when it's done, as well as on Facebook, so you get to see that. Just like that full tank shot you saw at the beginning of this video where I showed the reef, and I post pictures like that on Instagram, which is @MilosReef, and on Facebook as well, which is facebook.com/MilosReef. So that's where you get to see the updates. And like I posted pictures of the new dosing containers I just finished for Kevin, and he picked those up yesterday, and he loves them. He's very happy, which is great. I'm really glad he's happy. And I am going to add those to the website because they're a little bit nicer than the ones I've had all this time. So now, let me see if she replied yet. Okay, so what Andrea is doing, we still have another 18 minutes, so you still have time. Andrea is picking out 5 people, you have to be US based, to get a free issue of Coral Magazine. So Coral Magazine sent me a whole bunch to give away, and I'm mailing them to you on my dime. So if you're not a subscriber and you wanted to get a copy of Coral Magazine, another person's gonna be chosen. We picked 5 people last week, we're picking 5 this week, and we'll probably pick another 5 next week, and then we'll see how many are left. And I picked up all the manila envelopes, so they are ready to go. I need to write the addresses on the front, go to the post office, and ship all these out. So, that's, it's free. You get it. And you don't have to even do anything special. I mean, you're part of the chat, so you're chatting, which is pretty much all we need. And she is going to draw 5 names. And like I said, they have to be in the US. So if you are chosen and you're not, the reason it's got to be in the US is because shipping international costs a lot more. And since I'm paying for it, I thought I'd try and keep the, the expense down to a minimum. Because, it's nice to save a little bit of money. I had a customer today, a potential customer today, he wrote me, and he wanted to know about getting a custom sump built. And he wanted to know how long it's going to take, what's it going to cost, and what is shipping going to cost. And I told him, and he was just like, well, the price of the sump is great, but that shipping, oh my God. And I was like, yeah, I know. If I could get it to you for less, I'd be happy to do it. It's just not an option. It costs a lot to ship a big box. So in the end, I just said, just buy it from someone else that gives you free shipping. That's fine. I get it. Not everyone's going to buy something from me. Some people can't spend the extra, and I understand it. I'm the same way. I like to find good deals when I can. Sometimes I get a good deal, sometimes I don't. But, it is what it is. And so, if I can help you with something, then I'm happy to sell you something. And if it's something I can ship to you for less than the website computes, I will give you a refund. I do it every day. I send out little tiny refunds. Here's $6 back. Here's $8. Here's $12 back, because I was able to ship with the post office for less than what FedEx charges. So just keep that in mind when you're shopping on Milos Reef. I'm going to throw this on the screen here for a second since I was just talking about that. I don't want it on top of my face. Let me see if I can move this over here. That's a good spot right there. So yeah, if you choose to buy anything from the website, then it helps support my business, which that's the only thing I do. I don't just sit around talking on YouTube. I spend all week working on acrylic stuff for people and boxing up other things. I sell a lot of dry goods on my website. I don't sell any live goods. No corals, no fish, no cleanup crews. But if there's equipment you need, glue, RODI systems, filters, membranes, if you need coral dip, if you need t-shirts, There's a lot of different things I sell. There's something like 200 items. And so that is, and the website's mobile friendly-ish. It's still hard to buy things on a phone for me, but I know that at least 50% of you these days are coming to my website on a cell phone, and it is possible to buy that way. It just seems easier on a desktop or a laptop, maybe even easier on a tablet. I don't know. But I do appreciate any kind of business you throw my way. It lets me pay the bills and come back the next week to talk more on YouTube. So, and then also, I've been adding people to Club Mila's Reef. Now, Club Mila's Reef has been going for a year and a half. We have over 6,500 people, and I individually approve each person. I actually disapprove some people if I feel like they're not a good fit for our group. I'm very judicious. I care about who's in there, and I really care what goes on in the group. And I want it to be, it sounds so overstated, but I want it to be a safe space. I want you to be able to ask your question. I want you to be able to say, what is this thing, and not feel like you're being put down. Because every one of us has something weird in our tank, and we're like, what is that? And we have to ask for help. And when people are, and I've seen this in so many groups where people are just so aggressive and angry, and can't you Google it? And just, stop. There's enough anger in the world. I want a nice, happy place. So I made Club Mila's Reef a specific spot to hang out and talk and share pictures and ask questions and learn and see how you DIY'd some really cool thing and it made your life so much easier, and show us how to copy you. That's really what this is all about, and that's why I made it. Plus, it allows you guys to talk to me during the week, which you can't really do from YouTube. You get to talk to me for a couple of hours and then poof, I'm gone, and you're like, where did he go? So I'm on the group daily, and if you need me specifically, you can tag me at Mark Levinson or at Mila's Reef Inc., and I will then see it. Or you can even ask a moderator, can someone tag Mark for me? But I think you guys are pretty savvy. I think you can handle it. I mean, if you're doing this, you probably know how to get around a group. So I do want to also mention, I talked about Reef to Reef at the beginning. And I do want to emphasize that if you're not on a forum like Reef to Reef, you should be. And if you could document your tank build in there, from the first step forward or from today forward, like, hey, I set up this tank 4 years ago. I know I'm going to have to tell you what I did, but I want to document it going forward. Why not? Because people love to read through threads and learn from those threads how it all goes together and how you overcame certain obstacles. And it helps them avoid the same mistakes. Years ago, I wanted to get Scuba certified. And I mean, it was on my list. I want to do this. I want to do this. And I went into a diving or scuba diver group and just and this was on a forum, and I just read all the horror stories. Anything that even looked slightly dangerous, I wanted to read that story and how they overcame it. And I must have read 50 or 60 death-defying experiences. Obviously dead people are not posting. So it's the ones that survived that were able to tell the story. And I was fascinated. I don't know if it was morbidly fascinated, but it kind of prepped me mentally for things that could possibly go wrong. And I hadn't even been taught how to scuba dive yet. So I was kind of the cart in front of the horse on that one, because I was learning about something, learning about what goes wrong before I even really understood how it all worked in the first place. But then after I did that, then I got a book at one point. It was, I was a speaker one year at MACNA. I think it was the one in Boston. And the keynote speaker was the author of a book called Shadow Divers. And every speaker got this gift basket in their hotel room with that book inside. And I was like, oh, this is cool. It's about scuba diving. I love it. And then he read an excerpt of it during the banquet. And a lot of people weren't happy with that. The keynote can be entertaining. It can be educational. But it should never make you want to go to sleep. That's really important. And this guy was reading this section of the book, and he added a lot of flair to make the characters come to life. And I don't know, I guess he read for like 15 minutes maybe, and he told a little piece of the story, and I was loving it. And people were just like, oh, that sucked. And I'm like, really? I thought it was great, because I'm in scuba mode. And I guess these other people are more like, I just want to get back to the bar and hang out with my friends, and they just didn't care. But point is, the book was excellent. And so many people died in that book. The premise of the book is about a submarine from World War II that was discovered off of the New Jersey harbor, and they didn't know it was down there, and they discovered it at some point, let's just say the 80s, the 90s, I don't know. And so these divers would go way deep to get to the submarine to find out the name of the sub. And apparently the only way to learn the name, if it's not visible in the outside body, is to get inside the submarine all the way to the deck, and there would be a thing, maybe, let's just call it the, let's just pretend it's where the steering is handled, and there'd be a plaque, and that would be the name of the submarine, and they wanted to get to that. But going inside the submarine was ridiculously dangerous. There was a lot of tangled wires and stuff in there. It was super deep. You suffered from narcosis big time. People would go down there, and they were told you have minutes before you have to go back up again, and they would just start getting drunk on narcosis. They had too much nitrogen in their bloodstream, and they would just drift off to their death, and their buddy couldn't find them fast enough, and that was that. Or they got trapped in the sub and they died, and they had to move the body or retrieve the body. It was really a great, I loved it, and I was like, wow, I can't wait to be a diver. And I'm reading all of these people dying. I was like, I can't wait to dive a wreck. So I guess it takes a special person to to appreciate that. But no, really well written, very good book, very interesting. He did identify it at the end. It was really good. And a couple years later, I finally got my scuba classes, and I've never been nervous in the water. I've been swimming my whole life. I have swam in rivers, I've swam in swimming pools, of course, I've swam in the ocean. But when it came to scuba diving, there's a lot to keep track of, and I had to make sure that I'm safe and aware of all my gear, understand how it all operates, have basically a punch list or a checklist every time you go into the ocean. And I wasn't nervous, which I should have been. It's like, I've never done this before, and what if the tank runs out of air? What if I have to release my weights all of a sudden? What if I have to ascend quickly? Because they say don't do that. There's all these things, but I'd read about all these things that had happened to so many people. I'd read the book about all the people that died, and I got my classes. I felt really well informed, and I was just like, when can I get to a nice dive spot? And I've really had a great time. And a couple times I've done stupid stuff. I wish I had thousands of dives under my belt like others, but I think I've only dove about 50 times. I got certified in 2012. So I pretty much don't want to just dive to get a dive, to have a number and say, okay, now I'm up to a 51, 52, 50. I don't care. All I just want to do is dive somewhere that's worth it. And I really want to just stay in one spot and explore. I do not want to just rush along the surface and see it just moving under me like an airplane. I have zero desire to do that. It's not enjoyable. I don't get to appreciate anything. And let me give you a comparison. I know every one of you can compare to this because it's probably happened to you as well. When you're driving in your car through a neighborhood, you are staying in your lane, you're watching out for other cars, you're watching out for pedestrians, and you get to your destination. If you ever get on a bicycle and do the exact same trip, you're like, oh my God, there's a barber here? I never knew that. And you keep going, oh, I need to check out that delicatessen. Oh, that's cool. I didn't realize that we had a store that sells pastries here. I should have checked that out a long time ago. How did I miss that? Well, it's because we're driving, and we're driving 30, 40 miles an hour. But when you're on a bicycle moving at, I don't know what speed that is, 5 miles an hour, you get a chance to actually see some details. Or if you're going into the country, you're just driving and all it is whoosh, 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 just going past you with, you don't see the flowers. But when you're on a bicycle, you're like, man, this field is beautiful. I think I'm going to stop here and take a picture, or smell the flowers, and just really appreciate what it is. And I don't think we do enough of that. I think that we're so busy and it's such a race to get to the end, we're missing the ride. So take your time and appreciate things. And that's what I do in diving. I want to go down to one spot and I want to explore, I don't know, 200 square feet maybe. I don't really know maybe that's not right. Maybe it's more. Maybe it's 1,000 square feet. I'm not trying to cover 2 miles on that dive and then get back to the surface. I'm looking for the bugs and the critters and the worms, and I'm looking for flame scallops, and I'm hoping to find a blood shrimp. These things are really elusive. And I love night dives because you can go down and see things that you won't see during the daytime while all the fish are out. Once the fish go to sleep, all those little things come out. It's awesome. I love night dives. I've only done a couple of those. And my big, huge dive trip coming up in 2022 is going to have all the night dives I want. And I'm thinking I want them all. Like if it's 7 days, I want 7 night dives too. I don't know. We'll see what I can handle. But I'm looking forward to doing that. So I think that was as much as I had to say on that. Let me scroll up here for a second and change this and see what all you guys wrote. By the way, I hope the mic is loud enough. Yeah, someone said it was. Good. Let's see. Lamont, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. See, I'm glad I scrolled up. I would have missed that. Oh my God. Jay was telling me to talk loud because he's going to jump in the shower. Just bring the phone in the shower with you, buddy. Yay. So Tyler says, speaking of tank maturity, your advice on keeping on pulling out the hair algae worked. My tank is about to be 1 year old and looks amazing. No more hair algae. Thanks, Mark. And that is really important because I think, again, I was talking about how we wanted to hurry up and race to the end and we want to solve the problem and we just want to pour something in and it just magically erase the evil thing. Sometimes it's going to you have to get your arm wet and you have to keep getting it wet over and over and over until you can't stand it or your back hurts. Take a break. The next day, continue where you left off and keep working your way across. It's sort of like painting a house. You do one room at a time. You don't just paint the whole house in one day unless you are an expert painter, and most of us are not. So what we do instead is we work on a room. It takes us 2 or 3 days to get everything perfect, and then we move to the next room. And with your reef tank, if you have a hair algae problem, if you can start at one end and work your way across, or work on the worst offending rocks to get the bulk of it out, then you can go back and hit some more and hit some more and hit some more. My rule of thumb with green hair algae, which is a big problem for every hobbyist in the beginning, is to get the phosphates down first. I always tell you there's phosphates. Even when you say my test kit says there's none, if your tank's full of green hair algae, you have phosphates. I'm sorry. I'm sorry your kit is lying to you. If you want, rip out a bunch of hair algae by hand and then test your water 20 minutes later. I bet your test kit is not going to say 0 again. It's going to have a number. So you're going to want to lower the phosphates, wait a few days, and the way I lower it is with Phosphate RX, which I sell. And then after 3 days, usually it's weak enough, it's weakened, and you can start plucking it out of the tank. But you need your phosphates to be down, and using Phosphate RX is the best way to do it, in my opinion. And if you have a protein skimmer, or if you have or you use a 10 micron filter sock, that will catch the flocculant, which is what the phosphate turns into a solid, and it's exported. And when you put that stuff in, your tank should kind of turn cloudy. If it's not turning cloudy, then you're right, there's no phosphate. And then maybe it's just phosphate in the rock itself, and that's why the algae is growing out of that rock so proficiently. But typically it's in the water, and by putting in Phosphate RX, you watch the water turn cloudy, you're like, aha, I did have phosphate. Mark was right. And then you'll wait 3 days to start ripping out algae, and you rip it all out, and then you add a brand new hungry cleanup crew. I don't care how many snails and hermits you already have, they're not doing the job, they're lazy, they're full, they like Rod's food, or they like Larry's food, and they don't care about algae anymore, and so you have to do something else. You get a bunch of starving hermit crabs and snails from the fish store, or online, and you put them in your tank, and they just go to town, start mowing it down. And if you buy a buttload of cleanup crew, they will clean your tank in a day or two. It's going to be amazing, but you'll spend a ton of money. But honestly, a lot of us think about solutions and money. And so if somebody had a really bad hair algae problem, and I said to them, if I could fix that tank for $200, would that be okay? And they're like, yeah. Like, okay, buy $200 worth of cleanup crew and drop it in your tank. And because people are like, oh, but a snail is $4 and a hermit crab is $3, and you want me to get 50 of those, that's $150. Like, yeah, I know, but if you're buying them individually from the fish store, it's going to cost a lot. If you buy them in bulk online, you'll save some money. And that's how I've always done. I always buy in bulk. And I've mentioned this once or twice. I had ordered in a bunch of cleanup crew for a few local tank owners. We did a group buy. And I also picked some up for a client. And the client changed his mind or bought some locally while I was busy getting his stuff in. So here are the orders coming. He goes, oh yeah, I don't need that after all. I'm like, I just ordered you like 400 things. And he said, yeah, I went to the fish store and I put those in, they're fine. I was like, so I had 400 too many of critters. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with these things now? So I threw them into my frag tank that was looking overrun in algae. Because as you guys know, my frag tank always looks terrible. And The next day, that tank was pristine. I was like, that was awesome. I mean, sure, 400 cleanup crew critters in a 60-gallon tank is going to make a huge difference, but it's not going to work long term. They're going to start eating each other, or they're going to run out of food, and they're going to starve. So, you have to find a home for them. But, I guarantee you most people with algae problems never have enough cleanup crew. So you need it. But ripping out as much as you can first is really important. Michael Wells says, have you seen the new GHL and what's your thought and ability to test for nitrate? No, I haven't. That's news to me. I have only seen the Reef bot and the Trident, and of course the Mindstream came and went. But nope, I have to see what that is. I have not. Let's see. Mongo's Reef, congratulations on your brand new first fish and your brand new first tank. Well, I don't know if it's the first tank, but it's the new tank. That's awesome. I hope you got something pretty. Mr. Singh says, I was wondering if I can put a firefish or Royal Grama in with 2 clowns and a 20-gallon. Yes, you can. The Royal Grama may be a little territorial, but clownfish don't care. So that should be no problem at all. OP Pete says, if I were to purchase a sump today with your schedule, how long would it take to be made and delivered? I'd say 8 weeks. I am doing great on catching up on orders. And so I would say 8. It might be less, but it might be 8. So I'd just rather be upfront with you. It's reality. Derby City Reefer says, I sent an email about a custom overflow I need for a waterfall tank, and I'm revealing that I am revealing and would also like to get a price on a sump. I'll look for the email. As far as I know, I've answered all the emails. So if it was just recently, like this week, I mean, literally, I'm caught up. So if I didn't answer, you need to resend it. Or if you sent it today, I haven't had a chance to see it yet. Battle 611 says, I'm heading to San Antonio next month. Be cool to kind of pass by. Yeah. If you are in the, hey, there's a metal halide on. If you are traveling through Fort Worth, Texas, and you want to see my reef, all you have to do is let me know in advance, and we can schedule a visit. Turn that one off. It's messing up my lighting. There we go. That looks better. And if we didn't use the refugium light at all, it would look like this. See, it's still too blue. So I like it with that white light on. I think it helps a little bit. K Fouth says, how accurate do you think the Trident is? My Hannah reads 1 DKH lower than my Trident. I don't recall the, what do they call it? The plus or minus of the Hannah checker. I don't know what the range is. Like if it says 9.5, I don't know if the range is like, that could be 9 to 10, but odds are it's 9.5. I don't know what that range is of accuracy. But the Trident has a very tight accuracy. And I'm telling you, lately, I've noticed that my test kits are matching my Trident like super close. Alkalinity is almost exactly the same. Calcium is within a few ppm. Magnesium's matching, which is weird. So I actually think it's quite accurate. And it does come with calibration solution to calibrate it to make sure it's accurate. And it's good to double check with your gear. And your Hannah checker was $50 or $55 or something like that. And then you had to buy reagents. And the Trident is $600. I'm not saying that a device that costs $600 is going to be better than a device you bought for less than $100, but there's a chance that it could be more accurate. It's generally believed it is. And of course, you can always do ICP tests and see, but they never come back with alkalinity. That's the one measurement that doesn't seem to be included in ICP tests. Matt Owens reaffirms something I said earlier. He says, it takes 9 months to get all the automation locked in and on a new build, even for an experienced reef keeper. And that's it. Because not only do you have new gear, and especially if you're buying the latest gear, you know, like you bought the Versa, and you're like, I'm getting 4 of those. You're going to have to dial those in. You're going to have to learn how they operate, and you're going to have to learn how to make sure reservoirs don't run out of solution. You're going to have to make sure that your tubing isn't getting clogged on the end. These are all those little nuances that just are either forgotten or just not known yet. And by working on your tank for those 9 months, you learn all the ins and outs of how the protein skimmer works and doesn't work, how dosing works and doesn't work, how to add a calcium reactor and control it, getting the lighting and the spectrum and the duration the right amount, making sure the tank is always the right temperature range every single day, no matter what the temperature of the house is or office. There's so many things that can happen that giving yourself time to learn from all those weird things that can change, because it's not the exact same conditions every single day after day after day. If it was that, it would be super simple. Alrighty. Thanks for bringing that up. Mr. Reefbuster says, I completely agree on being patient on a new tank. And a few live streams ago, I told you I was waiting 4 months to turn the tank lights on after cycling, and you were surprised. Yeah, that is a long time. 4 months without lights is a long time. But I would definitely encourage people that are brand new cycling a tank, don't even run the lights the first 3 to 6 weeks. There is no point. 4 months is a long time. That is surprising, but yeah, it's all right. Maybe the tank's just idling with 0 livestock for 4 months. Then why would you need lights turned on? The only reason we even turn on the lights is just something to look at. And if you turn it on and leave it on, even though there's nothing in there, maybe there's 1 fish, there's no coral, there's no cleanup crew, you're going to have a tank full of algae, and you're dealing with a whole new battle you didn't deserve, you didn't earn it. It was unlucky because you turned on the lights way too soon. So turn on those lights when it's time to actually benefit the livestock in question. If it's a fish-only tank initially, a couple hours every evening is plenty. The daylight will make the tank have some light, and then, you know, in the evening you have the lights on for 2 or 3 hours. You can enjoy your fish and feed them and kind of clean the glass, and then turn them off. But if you have corals, you need 8, 9 hours of light a day. And a lot of you guys like much longer, and you want like 11, 12, 14 hours a day, which I totally disagree with, but you know, that's ultimately up to you. I should start those off now. When people say, hey, I've got an algae problem, how do I solve it? The first question is going to be, do you have a cleanup crew? And the second question is going to be, how long do you run your lights? Because it's like the same thing. I mean, everyone goes through it. It happens all the time. Jamie says, I've had my tank for 6 months now, but the water clarity isn't great. It seems like it's got tiny bubbles rather than fine particles. Carbon had no effect and on what have I been told and what do I do? Well, the bottom line is that you may have microbubbles blowing through your tank, and it's not detritus, it's not fish waste, it's not bacteria because it's something blowing around like particles. Carbon's not going to filter out air bubbles. It's going to clarify the water. It's going to strip weird nutrients out somewhat. It's going to definitely strip out other things that we don't want that could be a problem, which includes coral toxicity. And it can also remove some toxins and some trace metals. So it can do that, but it's not going to solve microbubbles. I would suggest if you're running a sump, look in the return zone, the spot where the return pump is, with a flashlight. And look down in there and see if it's bubble-free. If there are any bubbles in there, those bubbles are being pumped right back into your tank and blowing out of the nozzles. If there's no bubbles in the return zone, if it is completely just clear, perfect water, but you still see bubbles, then there's air getting into the plumbing somewhere from the pump going up. It could be the fitting at the top, it could be the lock line knuckles. They're sucking in a little tiny bit of air, and so that air is blowing out with the water into the tank, causing an obscurity or causing a lack of clarity. So you want to check that. Sometimes the solution is to make sure all the plumbing parts are completely submerged, but then you have to worry about the risk of siphoning out too much water in a power outage. So first of all, let's figure out where it's coming from. If it's in the sump, you got to solve it down in the sump. And if it's coming out of the top, maybe you need new Teflon tape, maybe you need new lock line that is sealed and doesn't let any air in, or maybe you need to lower the lock line a little bit further under the water to kind of stop the microbubbles. But I think that's what's going to solve your problem. H the yo stuff, what a name, says, at least you've got a seahorse for an avatar. What about a refugium with a deep sand bed and a bare bottom tank? If you had a huge refugium with a deep sand bed, that could be beneficial. But most people's refugiums are quite small compared to the display tank. Even mine, it's a big refugium, but it's not that big. You know, I would love to have a 40-gallon refugium on a 400-gallon tank, for example, about 10% or greater. But sometimes it comes down to a lack of space. So think about the small refugium has a small footprint of sand. You know, it's a small box, it's a small zone. There's just not a lot of surface area to actually work on denitrification like there would be with the footprint of your entire tank. I'm looking for the next question, guys. Glenn Smith says, can you show us the new dose containers you placed on Facebook this week, please? Do they come in different sizes? Let me pull up a picture off my phone. The actual nice pictures are still inside my Nikon. So turn this off. And we'll switch to, can't see it, hang on. Let's try this. So these are the dual zone dosing containers. And each section is 5 inches by 5 inches by 12 inches. And each side, or each individual zone holds just over a gallon of solution. It's like 1.2 gallons per zone. So it should go a good long time. And then the top of each container is got its own lid. So you can remove the lid to refill it. You could clean it a little bit more easily. You can get your hand in there. And then the rigid tubing and the fitting are included on these. And I'm selling these on my website for $150 each, plus shipping. And I was trying to make it bigger. There you go. So you can kind of see what they look like. They're a lot of work to make. They are not easy to make. There's a lot of sanding involved, unfortunately, which is why they are the price they are. And but they hold a lot of solution. They take up a small space. Like this thing here, I think this was 10 3/4 inches long, 5.5 inches wide, and 12 inches tall. So that kind of gives you a general idea. Remember, if you're asking questions, do add Mila's Reef at the beginning, please, so I can find it. There's a lot of chatter in here today. Lefty says, I hear a lot about dipping the rock first. Do you recommend it? What about using a combination of live and dry rock? Okay, so that's a great question. Thank you very much for asking that, because that is something we've done in the past. People did not like buying live rock because it was $7, $8, $9 a pound. It was expensive. So they wanted to get some base rock, and on top of that, they would put some live rock to seed the base rock. Again, there's still the waiting for that stuff to migrate, but it was cheaper than spending, I don't know, $1,200, $1,500 in live rock for your aquarium, depending on the tank size. And so they would use some base rock that oftentimes was dry, and they would stack it all on the bottom, and then they'd put their live rock on top, and it was a method that worked. The dipping of live, or not, well, you didn't say what kind of rock. You said dipping rock. You didn't say dipping live rock versus dipping dry rock. But any kind of rock you want to put in your aquarium, I love it when people put it in a barrel of salt water for a month before it goes in the aquarium. Just kind of let it kind of go through its paces. You could do some water changes. You might be able to remove phosphate that's coming off of dry rock. You can get, all you need is a trash can that's clean, a big pump like a mag pump. You can buy those on Amazon for nothing. And maybe a heater. I mean, if it's a big enough mag pump, it provides the heat. But this time of year, some people's temperatures are very cold. I was talking to a guy on Facebook recently, and he was saying it was minus 37. Fair enough, that guy needs a serious heater. But for most of us, you know, it's in the 30s, or it's in the 20s, or it's in the 50s, you know. So, you know, you want to keep your rock temperature somewhere around 72 degrees to 76. You know, it's not absolutely mandatory, especially with dry rock. You know, that temperature doesn't really matter. But getting it in salt water, in circulation, and then changing the water a few times before you put that rock in your tank will help. Like I said, you could reduce phosphate in the barrel. You could do phosphate RX right into that barrel and knock down the phosphates immediately over a period of a few weeks and really make it kind of lower the battle somewhat on what could happen. But if you have used live rock, you can also put that in a barrel of salt water for weeks. You could use live rock enhanced to clean it up right in the barrel. You don't have to have a protein skimmer. You don't have to do anything special. Just basically cure the rock and make it, you know, make it reef ready. And if you are planning this tank out 6 months from now, there's nothing wrong with getting rock that's covered in algae and throwing it in a barrel, just like I described, putting a lid on top to trap it from any light, and just let it simmer and change the water once a month on that barrel. And after about those 6 months, you're going to have some really nice rock you can use that's live, full of bacteria, probably has sponges. It'll be great. And then you can put it in your tank, and your tank will be rocking and rolling, and it'll be doing really well. J&A says, what are your thoughts on using mollies as algae control in a reef tank? Some people do that. I've never done it. I think it's kind of interesting. Some people swear by it. But how many do you need? You know, a lot of times when we put in a fish to solve an algae problem, like a lawnmower blenny, I mean, the name alone makes you think it's going to eat hair algae all day long. But they tend to like to eat film algae off the glass. They like to bite on the side of a big old tang like Spock and make Spock turn around to kill that little fish. You know, so I mean, can the fish devour it all, or is it just going to help eat at some of it? And that's the same with anything you put in. If you put in a sea hare, is it going to eat every bit of the hair algae? Well, what if it goes off into a corner and stops eating algae? Are you going to move it back onto the next rock full of algae? Because it will hunt it down, it will go for it. At one point it's going to feel full, and they really are well known to mow it down. There's nothing wrong with that. I like it. But as soon as your tank is almost algae free, you need to get that to another tank so it doesn't die in your tank because of a lack of food. When people have a flatworm problem in their tank, they say, well, I'm going to add a wrasse. Expecting the wrasse to eat every flatworm in the tank until there's none left is a dream. It might eat 100, it might eat 1,000, but it's not going to eat every last one of them. That's not how fish think. They're not thinking, I'm going to get every one of these bits of confetti until there's none left to make my owner happy. They're just going to eat opportunistically. Like, oh, there's one, snack. And then later in the day, you're dropping in your fish food and like, ooh, that's good, snack. Like, oh, there's a flatworm, snack. So it might help control it, but it's not going to erase it completely. So it's not a complete cure. Rick says, be sure you put some holes in the bottom of the Trident holder to make sure it doesn't hold water. Actually, it doesn't leak a lot. You know, when there is a leak, it happened to me once with one of mine. I had to get it replaced. But a little bit of fluid got in the tray where the bottles are, where the reagents are located. And there might have been a slight drip on the edge of my sump. But I mean, it was like one of those little splash puddles you get, not like a river. So if a little bit of solution got in that tray, that's okay. The tray is keeping the liquid there instead of dripping down into the cabinetry or into the sump itself. But I do want to put a couple of holes on whichever end is the back end of the Trident to feed the tubing through so that the tubing is straight and not have to bend up and go over the rim. So I'm going to talk with Ross about that and make sure that I drill the right side for him. But thank you for the tip. I actually had asked him, are you going to put a bulkhead in this and run tubing to some kind of container so if it were to leak, it would gather in the tray and then go down the drain and into a receptacle of some kind. But he said no, so that's not happening. Oh yeah, you're right. John, that same tray could hold all kinds of nifty things inside the cabinet, you know, or against the edge of the cabinet. You're right. It doesn't have to be just for tridents. That's true. Victoria, I love you. She said, your site and your posts are very informational and very easy to read for a noob like me. And that's the whole point. Let me do a slight rant because it's how I really feel. Years ago, there were certain speakers at MACNA that were determined to raise the education level of everyone in the room to make them way more scientific. In other words, they used difficult words, they used complex equations, they were really trying to educate us like a college professor would do. And I felt like that was the wrong approach. And I told them that. It was a couple of speakers, and I just said, I just don't agree with that method of teaching. And they said, we should all be striving for our best, Mark. Why would you not want to do that? And because it doesn't make sense to me. If you have 100 reefers in the room and 3 people are following that conversation and saying, yep, he's right, and yeah, I need to do that, and that's the right way to go, that's great. But the other 97 basically tuned out because it was too complex to absorb. I'm not advocating dumbing down something, but I definitely want to make it so that 97 people understand what I'm saying. And you know what? Those 3 people that were super smart, they totally understood what I said. And that's why I choose to educate the way I do, because I want everyone to gain the same understanding, because we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to have a reef tank. And so I want, yes, there's going to be times where it's going to be a deeper topic, or it's going to be more complicated, or there's more gear involved. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe I need all these things. I'll just keep doing this. Like, yeah, you're right. You don't have to be as complicated as I've chosen to make my own tank. I chose it. I've been doing this for 23 years, and I've found benefits in what I've done, and it costs more money. I mean, that's just, it is what it is. But at the same time, I'm also not having to tinker and mess with it all the time. And that's what I love most about it. I get to enjoy it. My big job once a week is to clean the glass and test the water. I'm not constantly in the tank trying to solve another problem. You just don't hear that much. And it's because that's the reality. I see someone's here from Germany. Dustin says, if I upgraded my 75-gallon reef to around 200 gallons, is there anything I should be aware of when it comes to cycling? Can I add base rock? Can I add more corals or fish right away? Okay, so when you set up a bigger tank, and I can tell you this from personal experience because I went from a 29-gallon plus a 55-gallon, 2 separate tanks, into a 280-gallon tank. Big change. And it came with livestock. So I had that livestock, my other livestock, all going into one tank. And mine was a tank transfer. It wasn't a gradual change, or like adding things gradually from those 2 tanks into the big one. I spent a lot of time, well, it wasn't that much time. I spent 14 days setting up the 280-gallon tank. And then as soon as everything was done, we put in the livestock, and we put in the livestock that came with the tank. We put in the livestock from the 29-gallon. We put in the livestock from the 55-gallon. We used all the rock from all those tanks and put it in there. And boom, I had an instant 280-gallon reef. But I had live sand from the 29. Well, no, I had live sand from the 55 that I used. We washed all the sand from the 280. It was a transfer. It's not the same as setting up a tank and cycling. When I set up the 400 behind me, that one, it cycled for 4 weeks. It was just sand and rock and salt water and time. And I just let it cook. And matter of fact, the water was getting kind of ugly. The water level was probably to about here. I didn't have it to the top. I didn't have it draining down yet because I was still plumbing the sump in. So what I did was I had the water up to here. I had the vortex move in the water. And I actually took a bucket and I turned it upside down on this corner. There wasn't any rock in the way. And I used it like a pedestal, and I stood a protein skimmer on top of it and skimmed the tank where it was to remove some of the crap that made the water look not good. So I wasn't skimming for the entire cycle. I cycled it, and then when the water was okay, but the water didn't look great, I knew I wanted the water to be pristine because the next step was going to be add more water to raise it up to the top so it could drain down into the sump. Because the sump was tied to a 250-gallon tank that was in the corner of the fish room where the livestock was waiting. So the livestock had been in a tank for months and months, 18 months total actually, while the whole ordeal of getting the tank replaced. But then that water in that tank and all the water in the sump were one, right? And now I'm going to suddenly tie in the 400-gallon tank into that. So I wanted the tank to go through its cycle. I wanted to get my base rock in there all supported where it wouldn't move. And then I just let it ferment for a month. And then a few days before I was ready to actually tie that in and add 400 more gallons to the entire system, that's when I ran the skimmer for a couple of days. It pulled out a bunch of stuff. The water looked nice and crystal clear. The temperature was the same because I put some heaters in the tank. And then I could actually have it start draining into the sump. And now I had 400, 150, 215 all tied in as one body of water. And then I had some people come over and they would reach into the 215 and they'd hand me a coral and I stood on the walkboard and I placed it in the tank and they'd hand me another thing and we kept moving livestock over. So can you add more fish more quickly was your question because the tank is bigger? No. It comes down to, is the tank ready for livestock? And in my case, I had all the filtration already going forever, for years. So the filtration, the refugium, all that was still rock solid. There was no weird thing to break in. The skimmer had been skimming. You know, everything had been doing its thing. I just added a new body of water. If you are setting up a brand new tank that you're not going to be able to tie it into the original water and the original sump, which you probably cannot, then you're going to go through the same thing we all do, where we wait for the cycle to complete, and then we introduce some livestock into there, let it adapt, and we add more livestock and add more livestock. But I wouldn't rush it. And you know what? When you have the nice big new tank and you have all that space, it's nice to appreciate that space. It's a lot of negative space. It's open. There's lots of room for the fish to swim. You have a few frags or some little LPS corals on the sand or whatever you've put in there, and you're like, oh, I can't wait till this tank is full. But technically you can wait, and you can appreciate what it is now, and then in 3 months from now it's going to look a little more full, and then another 3 months from now it's going to look, like half full, and then, in another 6 months it's going to start to look really mature, and then, at some point you're like, wow, there's no room to add anything else. The tank is actually really kind of maxed out. I need to remove this. I want to put that in. So yeah, that's my opinion on that. Mr. Reef Buster, thank you for the super chat. He said, Mark, this is to help with shipping the magazines. Thank you. That's really nice. Yeah, I'm hoping it won't be too much. I plan to just ship them bulk rate or, like printed matter. That's in the US, that's supposed to be really cheap. Odile, thank you very much, and I will use that. I will go to Starbucks tomorrow. Moonfruit says, can you make a custom engraved neon black magnetic frag rack? I can't do any of that. I don't have any kind of magnets. I've never investigated magnets. I've never tried to learn what to get. And I almost feel a little bit guilty asking other companies, hey, what magnets are you using? Where are you getting them? Because that makes me the competition. So I don't do that. I don't have any way to engrave anything. You really need someone that has a laser to make those types of things, because the laser will cut out the acrylic, it will etch in the design you like, or the logo, or the name you want on there. And I don't do any of that. I don't even have the ability to do that. So the answer is no. Dustin says, there's a show on TV where they set up a huge saltwater aquarium in one day. Does most of the livestock die right away? Actually, yeah. What happens is that when these tanks are set up rapidly like that, so that you can, have a television show, then what happens is you need dramatic effect. You want people to tune in. You want them to be wowed. You want, they show the client running in and like, wow, what a tank. These are the best fish I've ever seen. I get that. It's television. It's what we want to see. But reality is the tank can't handle it like that. It just can't. And as far as I know, if we're talking about the same TV show, I heard that in the contract they're required, as soon as they're done filming, to remove half of the fish from the system. And even then, it's probably still too many fish initially for that tank. But it comes down to filtration, and it comes down to total water volume and the size of the fish in question. So if you were to set up a 100-gallon tank and you put in 50 royal grommas, that would look really cool. There was a guy, and it's a very small bioload, but if you had a 100-gallon tank and you put in 15 tangs, that could be detrimental really quickly. The tanks may fight, they may not, but they will outgrow that tank way too quickly, and the filtration cannot keep up with the 15 tanks. I have 5 in my tank, and I feel like that's the most my tank needs. I'm not looking to buy another tank because they poop like crazy. Now, I did want to mention, there's a guy, he posted a video on Facebook about 2 months ago, and it was really cool. I didn't expect what I was about to see, and he did one of those vertical videos where you have to, you're watching the video like this, and he moves across the tank. I mean, tanks are horizontal. Turn your phone on its side and film, please. But anyway, vertical video, he showed the end, and he panned across, and he got to about here, and there was like 30 hippo tanks, and they were little bitty tiny guys. It was beautiful. It was like blue potato chips. And I was like, I love it. It's something I wanted to do myself years ago, and I went to a fish store, and he had a whole bunch, and I said, how much if I buy? I think I asked for 15, which I knew was a lot, but they're itty bitty. And he said, well, how much is each one? And I was like, I don't know, it says $35. He goes, okay, 15 times $35. And I'm like, forget it. And I just blew it off. I was kind of hoping that if I was buying a bunch, he'd give me a better deal. But he did not, and so I didn't do it. I loved the idea of a temporary situation where you add all these hippo tanks, but because it would be so cool to see them all just swimming and shoaling together in the reef. It'd be fantastic looking, and it looked great in his tank. But even he, as he was answering all the questions on Facebook, everyone's like, oh my God, and all the comments that people do when it comes to tanks and aquariums. He was quick to say, don't worry, I'm not keeping them all. That's just for now. It's fun, it's exciting, but they're all going to different homes. And that's the way it should be. He'll end up with 3. And the other ones are all going to be somewhere else. Luke says, the purple tang or the whitetail bristletooth tang, which would you like and prefer to watch swim through your tank? Well, if you're talking about my tank, I have one of each. I have the whitetail coal tang, and I have the purple tang. There's the coal right there, and the purple is in the back behind the gorgonian. And I love them both. The purple is beautiful, beautiful fish. I mean, it's also the dominant fish in my tank. Spock is not a bully. The purple tang's a little bit more aggressive. It tends to chase the other tangs away. Never Spock. They seem to get along fine. But she chases both yellows. And I've never seen her even care about the coal. It seems like no one cares about the coal tang. So if you were wanting to put a tang in your tank, the coal is a great one because not only does it seem to get along with everybody, it also it also cleans all the time. It's got, like, if you don't clean the glass in your tank, you'll have all these lip prints all over the glass. Thousands of them. I was gone on a trip and I came back 5-6 days later, and there was like 100 little kiss prints on the glass. Actually, I thought that was kind of adorable, but it was eating the film algae. And it'll nip at the sand and get things off the sand bed that it finds, and it'll nibble on the rock a little bit. I've never seen it bother a coral. It just doesn't. But it's a great worker tang if you want something that's kind of proactively helping the tank. The purple tang is just a beautiful fish, but I don't see it like constantly scouring the rockwork for something to snack on. I don't see it eating algae. It'll eat all the nori I put in the tank. That's not a problem. But yeah, if you're going to choose, it comes down to, are you looking for beauty or are you looking for usefulness? So usefulness, the bristletooth tang is a great choice. For beauty, the purple tang is gorgeous, and of course it's the same colors as Crown Royal, which is my favorite drink. So, I mean, it explains why I have both. Reef and Dive, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. Moonfruit says, I document coral growth on Instagram. Does that count as a forum? No, it does not. It's really hard to follow something like that. Someone would have to go to your Instagram channel, and they would have to go to the beginning and then work their way through every post and hopefully read some kind of description under each image that you've included, stating whatever it is that you're trying to educate. Forums are really, Instagram's easy. It really is. You go to your camera roll, you do share to Instagram, boom, done. And forums take a little more work because you got to upload the picture into the forum, you got to type the stuff, you got to have a username and password, you got to go back and update it again and again. But I ran one of the longest threads on Reef Central back in 2003 to 2010. And back then, you were able to have 25 posts to a page. And in those posts, you could have a total of, I think, 10 pictures. So you'd write your paragraph or two, you'd attach up to 10 pictures, and if you had more pictures, you had to then hit save and go to the next post and add more pictures and descriptions, and then hit save and add more pictures. And it was kind of a beating, especially if you're trying to show someone, hey, I just did such and such, and you're documenting how you built your cabinetry. And you go through all that, and right in the middle of your post, there's somebody that says, hey, that looks great, what about such and such? And you haven't had a chance to finish posting because you had another post that you're working on while they're busy interrupting. But, you know, whatever. That was just how it was back then in those days. And I would document my 280-gallon tank from the first day. I started the thread telling everyone I'm planning to set up this tank in 14 days. And everyone's like, that's crazy. I'm subscribing. I want to see this. There's no way. You're out of your mind. And I was thinking, what's the big deal? I'm just going to put a tank in the wall behind me and I'm going to set it up. I think it'll be fine. And so I had a friend named Evan, and he turned out we were local. He was in the same town as me. He says, Mark, I want to come over and help you. And we did that in 14 days. It was amazing. We got no sleep. We were exhausted. It was so hard. I worked like crazy on it for days, and then finally I said, I have to go to work, because I was self-employed. And so I went to work like a big, massive shift, and I was so wiped out. And even while I was at work, I was thinking about the tank and what I had to do the next day. So out of the 14 days, I think there's one day that I didn't work on it at all, because I just couldn't. I had to work and sleep. And then it was right back to it, and on the 14th day, we put the livestock in. And it was really cool. It was crazy. All that is documented on that thread. And that thread was very popular, and it was super long. And what happened was, remember I told you it's 25 posts per page, and then you went to page 2, and you had a maximum of 50 pages, and then they would lock the thread, and you had to start part 2. And then, you know, you would do another 25 times 50 pages, and then part 3. And I had something like, I don't know, 8 or 12 parts to that thread. It was the longest thread ever, and it documented that tank from the first drop of water going in. It was from 2004 all the way to 2010. And in 2010, 2010, I did an April Fool's Day joke on my own website, Reef Addicts, and Reef Central got mad at me and banned me, and I'd never been back. And that was the end of that. And within a matter of a couple of months, because that was April Fool's Day, April 1st, on July 3rd, so 3 months later, the 280-gallon leaked, and I kind of felt glad the tank had come to its end. I hated the leak, I hated everything I had to go through, but I was glad that the tank had come to its end because I couldn't update the thread because I was banned. And so I thought, you know, I was having this really hard time leaving Reef Central and living on Reef Addicts. Reef Addicts was my own website, which was a blogging website. It still exists. It's still there to this day. And on Reef Addicts, I blogged about my tank, but I had a really hard time abandoning my big build thread that had such a huge following. And so when they banned me, I was like, well, that solves that. I don't have to feel guilty because I can't do it anymore. I'm done. And so I focused on Reef Addicts full time. And more people were joining, but this was back in 2010, and blogging wasn't popular back then. I thought blogging was great, and here's why. And yes, I'm sure there's a ton of comments, and I'm getting way behind because I'm telling these big, long stories, but some of you haven't heard this stuff. Some of you have no idea. So when I set up Reef Addicts, the idea was the front page would be articles that were news, you know, or helpful articles like measuring PAR, or how to look for stray electricity, or how to solve cyanobacteria. And then when you went into what would be the forums, all you found were blogs. And I was blogging about the tank, and the beauty of a blog is it can be as long as you want. I could write 10,000 words and add 99 pictures and hit submit, and it was 1 mega post. And I felt like that was great because I could tell my story, explain everything with pictures, and have no one interrupt me. You know, and then at the bottom, under the blog, were the comments, which is sort of like when you read articles on news channels these days. Every article is basically a blog, and then there's comments underneath. And that's what I did back in 2010. And there were people, you know, I don't know, 1,500 people, 2,000 people, 2,500 people joined and were doing blogs. But they were used to forums, and they had such a hard time embracing the blogs, even though I thought it was so much better. And, you know, fast forward 10 years. There are blogs everywhere. People love them. Plus, there's Facebook, and there's groups, and there's Instagram, and there's TikTok, and all these ways of sharing quick knowledge. And the forums have gone to the wayside. Reef to Reef has spent a lot of money and time to keep forums alive and well and active. And his Google Analytics does not lie. He has a ton of traffic to that forum that is all broken down into subforums where you can talk about reef keeping, you can talk about chemistry, you can talk about lighting, you can talk about diving, you can talk about equipment. There must be 30 forums, and then there's probably like, I don't know, I haven't counted, but let's just say there's 60 or 100 vendors selling on there. So you constantly are seeing coral sellers selling stuff. You see dry goods people on there. I was a sponsor on there for a while. There's just, it's another world that people are not used to, or are used to and refuse to leave because they love it. And I really did live and breathe my forums, back in the day. But when I got banned, I switched over to blogs, and I really focused on that. And I blogged everything about the 400 gallon. And man, it was a year ago, I had the idea that I could do a weekly show where I shared the knowledge, basically told the story of the 400 gallon from the inception, a few blogs at a time. And I was going to just grab pictures from the blogs, because I don't expect you to go to Reef Addicts and go to page 1 and start from there and work your way through whatever I have, 1,500 entries on there. And so I thought if I tell the story, it goes on YouTube and it doesn't get lost, and especially if something were to ever happen to that site, I wouldn't lose all the content because it would be documented on YouTube. So, but here it is a year later, and I haven't even done the first one. Lots of ideas, never enough time. PR Fish Girl says, I have a NASA who was in quarantine for 3 weeks, who was munching on nori, not eating frozen, but was eating. And now he's in the 200 gallon tank, barely touching the nori, just grazing, and it's not enough. NASOs are a little moody, and they may go days without eating at all, and then suddenly they'll kind of feel good, and they'll start actively getting involved with the food. You already used this food before. It's a new tank, it's a new rockscape, and maybe new neighbors, other fish, and it's getting settled in. I would still keep nori in the tank if you can, try each day. And you can put the nori in on a magnetic clip or tie it to a rock or however you're doing it, and place it in the tank and give it 5 or 10 minutes. And if there's no interest, remove the rock from the tank, or I'm saying remove the nori from the tank, and then try it again tomorrow. And maybe you'll see some interest in that. And you can always try different foods. You can put in flake food, you can put in pellet food, you can put in nori, you can put in frozen food, and you can see what works best. You can even try banana. Banana's fun. And you can blanch broccoli if you want to try broccoli. You could use butter lettuce if you rinse it really well to get any kind of pesticides off of it. Or maybe use organic buttered lettuce. So there's no, I would still rinse it. Dave says, if setting up a new tank to replace the old tank, should I take some of the sand from the existing tank and seed the new sand for the bacteria? Yes. Yeah, grab like 2 or 3 cups. Just fill up a little Ziploc bag with some of that sand, and then set up your new tank. You add your sand in there, your dry sand. You put your rock in there. You add your salt water. And then when the tank is full of water, and you've even, don't turn on the flow yet. Just get the water in the tank, and it's all just sitting there. And then lower the Ziploc bag to the bottom of the tank and open it and just pour a little mound of sand. There'll be a hill of sand in your tank. And then turn on your flow, like maybe 10 minutes later, and that sand will level out. It'll get all smooth, and you can actually scooch it a little bit later, like 2 or 3 days, if it's not smooth enough for you. But that will seed it into the sand bed, and they'll spread out. That's a good method. You guys keep joking about super long live streams. I don't know what you're talking about. Gavin, the name of the book was called Shadow Divers. I don't remember the name of the author, but it's a good book. So you could try that out. Brian Hudson says, is it okay, I'm sorry. I've heard it's okay to use super glue or GE silicone #2 mold free. I'm building a scape or an aquascape and using a lot of the silicone. Is it safe in larger quantities, or is it slowly going to release toxins in my tank? I'm not a fan of what you're doing, but I would stop. I don't know. I think that's the wrong silicone. I know you say it's mold free. I think that's literally the wrong one, because there are 100% silicones, and then there are silicones with a mold inhibitor included, which is actually a toxin in itself, and nothing lives. So if you are using one that has mold inhibitors, you need to start over. You need to remove as much of that as you possibly can. I would much prefer you go online and find some aquarium silicone that is made for aquariums. So let me see if I can pull up a picture really quick. I have something. I think I still have it here. I have to do a search really fast, sorry. Okay, so this right here is available at Home Depot for sure. It's in the glues section. It's made by DAP. It's 100% silicone, and it says right on the tube. Why won't this let me zoom? Oh, that's as big as I can go because of the size. It says aquarium safe right down here near the bottom, and it says aquarium safe right here on the packaging. And that is what you want to use. This is $5 a tube, and you don't have to worry. Aquion makes one as well. So if you are looking for aquarium safe silicone, I would use something made for aquariums. And you can use a lot of it, but you need to let it cure completely. And normally with silicone, you want to wait 24 hours. But because you're trying to bond rock together, it might take longer because it's bigger, thicker blobs. It's not like a nice clean seam. It's like a dense puddle. And we want to make sure it's completely cured all the way through. And that could take days or even weeks to really cure all that silicone. But then at that point, it's done, and you should be completely safe to use it. Safe to put livestock in. But super glue gel is totally safe in your tank. Two-part putty, like the one from Two Little Fishies, the one from DD Aquariums. It's called Aquascape Putty. I use that one all the time. I love that one. There is a putty from Tunzi that is called Coral Putty, I believe, and it's the color. It's coral color. It's kind of a peach colored, and that one works really fast. I mean, you mix it, and within, man, it felt like, I mean, I only tried it once, but I'd say within 30 seconds it was hardening. So you like needed it and used it. The DD stuff, you have more time with it. The stuff from Two Little Fishies is another one that you probably have some time with. And then some people, I think, use something called Aquamend. I don't know who makes that. I don't know if that's a Home Depot product. But I stick to things, anything that's going in my tank, I try to always make sure I'm buying it that's made for aquariums, if I can. Rob is asking the question about my tank lights. Listen, I've got a video on my channel that is called, I think it's something like how long should my lights run daily? And I explain my entire crazy system. Or you can go to reefaddicts.com and search for staggered lighting. So put staggered lighting Milev and hit Google, and see what you get. Or staggered lighting Milev site reefaddicts.com, and you'll get right to that article. And that is where I show how my lights move across the tank, and so things are turning on and off. Today's stream, I wanted to not have the metal headlights come on, and you saw one turn on and I turned it off again. I was trying to kind of find a color behind me that I liked. And JS, no, I don't know what we're talking about. Oh, yeah, I still don't know what we're talking about. I think I do, but I didn't know what I was looking at. But feel free to send it one more time if you want. Blake Scott says, any idea what you'll be talking about at Aquashella? No, I don't, but hopefully I'll have something cool by then. Aquashella, I believe, is in May. I started adding things in my calendar finally, trying to be a little bit more proactive in that regard. I got to keep moving things around. The screen is never big enough. I really wish I had dual monitors. Okay, so let me look at May. Aquashella is May 16th and 17th here in Dallas. And there is an Aquafest in Louisiana that's on the 18th and 19th of April. And there's something happening in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I think is in May. I haven't put that on my calendar yet. And there's a Niagara Coral Show that I talked about in last week's live stream, and I put all the details in there. That one, well, I don't have it handy, and I don't want to make you guys sit here and wait as I go find it. But I did talk about it. Like I said, if you go to last week's live stream and just look in the video description, there was the link to the event. And I actually need my passport for that talk. I got to remember to bring that with me to the airport. Jacob says, what are your thoughts on Jake Adams from Reef Builders saying you don't need to cycle a tank before you add corals? Apparently there's a new science that says you don't have to. I disagree. I don't know the science he's talking about, but I mean, corals aren't as demanding on the, they're not adding a significant bioload to the tank. They're taking up nutrients and trace elements from the saltwater. That's why we're so worried about alkalinity and calcium and magnesium. But I don't personally know. I guess I'd have to dig into it, but I don't know how the corals would do as the tank goes through ammonia surges and then nitrite surges and then the nitrate jump and fall. I just don't know. But there are a few things that Jake has shared that I don't agree with, and that's okay. We have disagreements. It is what it is. He's not the first person I disagreed with on some topic. So, but for the most part, most everything does work for some people some of the time. But no, I just cycle the tank, take your time, enjoy yourself. Let the tank get some maturity, then add the livestock. There's no reason to rush this stuff. Eric says the ATI ICP test does include the alkalinity test. For some reason, I thought it didn't. ATI, that's why. Okay, yeah. I've been using the one from icpanalysis.com. So interesting, good. Thanks for double checking that, yeah. Lynn says, has there been any news on the show that you're going to be on? I haven't heard anything. I mean, there's a chance that I'm not going to get chosen, but that would be cool if it did. Chance Clark says, to order from your website is the only way to pay is PayPal. No, actually no. When you're on the website, you're buying everything you want. So you put everything in the cart, you add your shipping address and all that, and then you hit submit order, and it takes you to PayPal. But then if you scroll down slightly, instead of logging into PayPal, it'll say continue with debit credit card or pay with a debit credit card, and you can just use that instead. And so that's for those people that don't want to use PayPal. PayPal is still going to handle it, but you're going to be using your own debit card or credit card to make your payment. Mike Garcia says, how can I order from you? You can get whatever you're looking for from milasreef.com. And a lot of people have been asking me for stuff that has to be shipped internationally. And they said, well, look, your website only says US and Canada. That's because the website doesn't even know what you're trying to do and doesn't know how to do international. Anyone that wants anything internationally, here's what you got to do. You got to send me an email. You have to tell me exactly what you want, how many you want, and what size you want. And then you have to tell me your postal code, and I will then take everything, put it in a box, see what it weighs, and I will find out what shipping costs, and I will send you an email telling you it's going to cost this much. And then if you like it, you're going to send me your full address, your phone number. I'll have your email address because you're emailing me. And then I will send you an invoice so you can make payment. And usually, a lot of people are ordering things I can just put in a box, like F-Aptasia, Live Rock Enhance, a T-shirt, stuff like that. And with those, I can just ship those out. And it seems like a lot of orders that go internationally are around $14 to $24. I just had someone order something big for me, and it's going to be $85 to ship to them. Also, I haven't heard it from every customer, but I think it's probably every customer. There are tariffs when the stuff comes to your country that you have to pay some kind of a tax when it shows up too. So rather than being shocked and surprised, just know it's going to happen. If you're wanting this bad enough, it's going to cost you a little bit more because you don't have it available in your area. And all I can do is provide it to you. I cannot control what the governments choose to do when it comes to taxation. Rob's Reef says, I added GFO yesterday to help get rid of diatoms. Diatoms are a food for your bacteria, and you don't need to run GFO for that. Matter of fact, GFO won't have any effect on diatoms because they're not growing from phosphate and nitrate that I'm aware of. Diatoms are just a natural food group. It's a byproduct of the lighting on the tank, and it grows, and the bacteria consumes it, and the bacteria blooms, and you have a lot more bacteria in the system. And Mike says, how long should I keep my refugium light on? Depends what you're growing. But if you're growing Cadomorpha, for example, 9 hours a day is plenty. The Fish Guy says, my yellow chorus wrasse is alive after I added my tangs. It was missing for 6 weeks, and now it's back. There was a person that gave me their yellow chorus wrasse. And I put it in my tank, and I never saw it. And then I would see it. And then I'd never see it. And I realized what was happening was it was on a completely different schedule than the lights of my tank. So the person I got the fish from, they ran their lights late into the night and pretty much had the tank off during the daytime. So that fish was like 8 hours ahead, basically, clockwise. And so the lights would come on, all the fish are out and about, no yellow chorus wrasse. And then way later in the day, suddenly there's a yellow chorus wrasse, and the lights would turn off that night, and the fish are all tucked in, and it's still swimming around looking for stuff, using ambient light from the room or the television, and then eventually would go to bed. And it took me a while to realize it was on a totally different clock than my reef. And after, I don't know, I'd say a few weeks or so, it then learned my clock and had adjusted its schedule, and it would dive into the sand right as the lights were turning off, and then it would emerge a little while after the lights came on. It's really cool when I don't know if you've had a sand-dwelling wrasse before, but when I had my 29-gallon, I had this little tiny yellow chorus wrasse. It was with a white belly, so they call it lemon meringue yellow chorus wrasse, or lemon meringue wrasse is what they called it, because of the white belly. And you would see it swimming around all day and picking at rocks and swimming through the corals and just looking pretty. And then around nighttime, I could watch it. It would like come to the front near the clam, kind of swim around right above the sand. It was like looking for that perfect spot. And I swear, this is not an exaggeration. Literally, as the light would go click, which is on a mechanical timer, you would just see it go right into the sand. And it did it every night. You could just stand around the tank and watch it happen. It was so cool. And it was just so funny. He knew exactly what time it was. It was amazing. Robert McCreary says, I'm interested in the Eheim feeder chimney. Can I see a better picture of it mounted on a rimmed tank? No. I do have a couple of videos. So this is the Eheim chimney on my website. And what it is, you put your auto feeder on top. I call it Eheim because I made it for the Eheim pump. But it works for the AFS, which is part of the Apex group of equipment. And it sits on the top of the overflow box. Like the overflow box has a lid, you just set it on top. You can put a piece of Velcro if you want, which is smart. Then you put the motor on top right here, and as the thing turns, it drops the food into here, and this part is submerged under the water partially. Right here, in this spot, you can barely make out the chimney is perforated through the water about 1/2 inch. So when the water hits the surface of the water, it gets wet, and then it drizzles down into the reef and doesn't just flow into the overflow box. This works great, and I have it on the overflow box on right there. It's right in front of the overflow box. That's the overflow right there. And on my frag tank, it's right by the overflow box. And in my anemone cube, it's right by the overflow box. But the food doesn't go into the overflow. It goes down and into the reef, and the fish are gobbling it up. And it works great. Now, if you had a tank that had a rim like a Eurobrace, you could connect it to the Eurobrace. But it's just so much easier to put it on the overflow box because that's a wide open area. And all you need on that overflow box is a lid. If you have a lid on there already, great. If you don't, I make lids. And then you can have your lid on top and no more algae grows in the overflow box, and you can put your chimney on there, put your auto feeder on top, drop food right in. You can see I haven't pulled off the protective paper. That's why it's this color. I've been making a bunch of those because everyone keeps buying them lately. I have one customer that asked me to make him a way to hold onto the tank, and I still haven't figured out how to do that yet. He's still waiting. So, but like I said, if you go to the auto feeder chimney link on my website, I think there's a link to one of my videos on YouTube where it shows it in action, and you see it from above and you see it from below. And then my other video where I talked about how to set up a Durso really quickly, the first half of the video, well, no, the first minute is me putting together a Durso standpipe. I'm like, that's it, you're done. And then I talked about the Eheim feeder sitting on top of my overflow box of my anemone cube. So you got a couple of examples there you can watch. M. Chris says, what is the main difference between curing rock and cycling rock? If you leave rock in a trash can as you described, would you consider that curing it or cycling it, or both? If the rock was wet, like let's say it came from Florida and you live in Idaho and it got shipped to you overnight in a box wrapped in wet newspaper, it's going to cycle because it's been exposed to air. So you put it in the trash can and you get the circulation going, and you are cycling that rock because it has to go through the ammonia spike and then nitrite rise and nitrate rise, and it all collapses, and then it's good to use. Curing rock is basically just putting it in a barrel and just letting it in circulation, but it never was exposed to air. It's a very small nuance, but cycling adds more time to the process because you have to go through the cycle first of all before you even get to the next part to where it's safe. But it's not a huge difference. Cycling is just cycling, like cycling a tank, and then curing is just kind of getting it acclimated to water, getting bacteria spread onto it. And like I said, Live Rock Enhanced would be a really great choice because not only will it eat any decay off of the used rock that you're using, or even dry rock you're using, it will seed it with new bacteria because there's bacteria in every jar. Lunatic Rider says, if building a tank, where's the best spot to place bulkheads on the bottom of the overflow box or above? Please need help. The guy who built the tank left me hanging with a new leaking tank. Oh my God. Well, you got more problems than I do. That's terrible. I like bulkheads to come out the bottom of the overflow box. That's my preference. All of my tanks, the bulkheads go straight down, the plumbing goes down, and it goes to a sump. So that's my preference. If you had to go out the back of the tank, like holes through the back wall, and you put a box on the inside, and then water went out and down, you have to go sideways. But my preference is always to point down. So that would be my suggestion. And the whole leaking tank thing, I hope you can solve whatever happened and get that resolved. Justin says, I have a 65-gallon Red Sea Max. I'm getting a pH reading of over 8.5. What would cause high pH? I don't dose anything to the tank. Maybe it's a false reading. What are you using to measure it? If it's a pH probe, you might need to calibrate the pH probe. If it's a pH pen, maybe it's inaccurate. If it's a pH test kit or a pH strip that you dip in water, I don't believe those anyway. So I would want, like the American Pinpoint pH meter is really what I would recommend for measuring pH if you don't own a controller. And all the controllers have a pH probe tied in. If you're using a controller, I would again think you need to go ahead and double check and see what's going on with the probe, and it might need to be calibrated, or it's a defective probe. Scott Morrison says, how long would you drop acclimate mollies for a reef tank? I don't know. I've not done it, but I bet Google will tell you. Oh, thank you, Rob, for letting me know that. All right, if that's the case, if I can't just ship it as that, I'll just pay first-class mail. That's fine. I did not know that. I figure I could take one up to the post office and talk to them, or I can check my shipping module and see what it spits out. I just haven't had a chance to do it yet. But I'll be shipping 10 out on Monday, or 9, because Kevin picked his up yesterday. Odile says, have you seen a lavender tang? Only pictures. Raul says, can you explain the difference between shoaling and schooling? I already learned it by experience, but it would be a good explanation. Yeah, actually, I did a podcast about this topic once because it was bugging the heck out of me. Everyone says, where can I get a good schooling fish? What fish are good to school in my tank? And I was like, I don't see fish schooling in our tanks. So we had to bust out the dictionary. Like I said, it was on the podcast, it was on Reefcast. And Evan and I did our homework, and we learned that schooling is when all the fish are equidistant from each other at all times. So when you look at a collection of fish in the ocean and they are all exactly the same distance apart and moving in a group, that is schooling. When you just see a cluster of fish kind of moving in a pack, that's shoaling. And so everyone says I'm looking for schooling fish for my tank, but everyone means I'm looking for shoaling fish for my tank. So they want to have a bunch of anthias, they want to have a bunch of chromis, they want to have a bunch of banded gobies, or they want to have a bunch of gudgeon gobies. These are all fish that like to be in groups and swim around in a nice cluster. Even if you got a harem of flame angels, they're going to be going, it was really cool. The club president of the club I joined way back in 2002, when I was at his house, I was looking at his reef tank and it was nice. And he said, you want to see something really neat? And I was like, sure. So he grabbed some frozen food or some flake food or something he put in the tank. And all of a sudden, all these flame angels came swimming out from every direction. And they were super excited to get a meal. And I was like, wow, how many of those are in there? And he says, I have 5 flame angels. And I'd never heard of anyone doing that. You know, everyone wants a flame angel. No one buys 5. And this is 2002. And he bought 5 and he was super excited. And I was like, this is amazing. And I said, wow, so this is doable? I thought they'd fight or something. And he says, Mark, that's called a harem of angels. So I was like, okay, it's a harem. And by the way they swam in that tank, they obviously were not schooling, because they were swimming around every different direction, but they were all in a cluster. It was really cool. They were shoaling. So that's the difference, guys. I hope that that was somewhat interesting for you. ATF in the house says, is there any way to figure out a rough idea to price out setting up a fish room from scratch? I bet there is. I've told you guys that I believe if you're trying to set up a reef tank, and you said fish room, I didn't miss that, that if you're trying to set up a reef tank with all the gear and using good quality gear that's going to last a long time, I tell people you're looking at tanks, stands, sump, heaters, pumps, dosing reservoirs, top-off containers, protein skimmer, sand, rock, salt, test kits, nets, cleaning sponges, everything except the livestock, you're looking at $47 a gallon. But the fish room is a different matter entirely, because you're dealing with a room with a foundation, walls, circuits, not one circuit, ventilation, possibly an air conditioning duct bringing fresh air in. So you've got that to consider, and that right there, there's probably some kind of a price per foot when it comes to a remodel, like $13 a square foot or some number like that. So maybe that would work for a fish room. I was thinking about adding on to my house, and I wanted to change the layout of the house within and expand that direction. I had these big ideas. And it would involve adding a new master bedroom and a new master bath, and then the living room and dining area would become twice the size it is now. So it'd be a really big open area. I was really excited about that. And man, I feel like that was looking at ballpark just for framing and foundation work. And you know, some of it I can do myself. I mean, literally, I could do most of that myself, but I don't want to. I think that was around $13 a square foot. And once you incorporate plumbing, the price per square foot goes up a little higher because plumbing is a lot of it. You know, the drain and the cold and the hot water feeds going that direction, extending more wiring or adding a new power panel that can handle the larger load of the house. That was another expense. Ventilation, all the insulation, all the whole new extra roof being added on. That's a whole other experience that, you know, would cost money. But anyway, in the end, I thought maybe I'll just stay humble and just enjoy what I have and be glad this house will be paid off in whatever it's going to be. I don't know, another 10 years. And that'll be the end of it. Dustin says, should I wear gloves when testing water or using dips like Coral RX? Are these chemicals bad for the skin? Occasionally you're going to come across someone who has a sensitivity to whatever they're touching. Some people are basically allergic to their salt water, or they're allergic to the hammer coral in their aquarium, or they get stung by their anemone, while another person can just snuggle up with that anemone and not even show a single ant bite on their skin. So do you need gloves? No, not for testing. I've never had that problem. I am working by the sink. I'm rinsing my hands and the vial after every single test, so that's not a factor. I clean my hands off on a towel. When I reach my tank, you know, and as soon as I'm done, I rinse off. I rinse my hands a lot. But when you're handling like two-part putty, the kind you have to knead and mix up to make one color and then plant that in the tank, you absolutely must wear gloves. When you're dipping corals, I don't know anyone that wears gloves while dipping. It seems like the chemicals that we use or the chemicals that are within the dips just aren't affecting us. But if you discern some problem, if you see a redness, if you see swelling, if you feel itchy, and you want to start wearing gloves, you can. The thing is, a lot of times we have to reach in deeper than the length of the glove, and water gets inside the glove, and it's kind of pointless now because now you just have a glove full of water while you're working. So, you know, you might decide it just isn't worth the hassle. But again, you know, if you're trying to just be safe, you can definitely put them on. You want to make sure you're finding a glove that doesn't have anything inside of it, that if you put your hand down in the tank and the water goes into the glove, it doesn't like flush out whatever's inside there. You know, like if it is a cornstarch, you know, is that, you know, would that be okay in a reef versus is it some kind of weird antibacterial powder that's more like a deodorant? That would probably be detrimental to your tank. Oh, somebody says there's bugs in organic butter lettuce. Okay. So like I said, just rinse it really well. I saw a couple of videos back in the day where they would, butter lettuce is probably my favorite lettuce. I grew up with it in Switzerland, and it was, every salad was that. In America, everyone gets iceberg or romaine, but butter lettuce is the lettuce they grow in Europe. And I saw this really cool video of a tank, some kind of big reef tank, and they took the entire head and you just saw this arm push the lettuce to the bottom of the tank, and all the tangs came in and just attacked it. And I was like, that is so cool. Why don't we do that in the US? That's so neat. So if you were to do butter lettuce, I guess you have to fill up your sink with tap water and probably a little bit of vinegar and just submerge it and shake it off, you know, and then, I don't know, maybe rinse it once to get the vinegar off, and, you know, if there's that much. And then you can put it in your tank. Or you just take a few leaves, clean it off, you know, rinse it under the sink, wipe it down, pat it dry, and then put it on a clip and stick it on the glass or rubber band it to a rock and see what your fish think. Remember, whenever you try anything weird like this, just put a little bit. Because if you put a big thing, the fish are scared of it because it's, what the heck is that weird thing in the tank? I'm going to stay away from it. And because it doesn't grow in a reef, right? But you put in a small piece and they snack on it, they like it. The next time you can put in a slightly bigger piece, then the next time you can put in an even bigger piece, and all the fish are getting involved. And then eventually you can get to that point where the guy's putting in an entire head of lettuce and they just mow it down. It's really cool. But yeah, we don't want to put any kind of pesticides in our tank or even bugs. Even though technically I guess fish do eat bugs that land in the ocean and come down underwater. But I wouldn't do it on purpose. Suraj says, have you considered using the Ecotech Versa for your calcium reactor? Yes, I talked about that on last week's live stream, and I showed pictures of it on Instagram and on Facebook, and it's been running now for about 8 days, I guess, and it's doing exactly what I want, silently. Very happy with that. In case you didn't hear this earlier, Kim, Spock wasn't seen by the vet yet. That is going to be next Wednesday. We talked on the phone a couple days ago and got all the things arranged. So that appointment has been bumped to next Wednesday. But thank you for asking. Mike says, how can I remove white sponge from my rocks? Probably a toothbrush. Oh, that's cool. Harkins Aquatics shared this really cool nugget of knowledge. Nios coral cement works well, but sets in 2 minutes, but you can slow it down with citric acid. I'd love to hear more about that. How much citric acid? That's interesting. Tony Tone says, what was the snail you spoke of earlier that comes out of the worm from the rock, or like a worm from the rock? So there's a couple of things that come out of the rock work as worms. I was talking about vermitid snails, but there's also a thing called a peanut worm. Peanut worms are awesome. Don't kill peanut worms. If you see one, appreciate it. It's an awesome little hitchhiker, and I have a really cool set of pictures on my Critter ID page of the peanut worm, and I found the whole thing. It had come out of the rock, and the butt, the body of it looks like a peanut. It's cool looking. And then there's like this long tube that it can stretch super long with a bunch of little stripes on it, and then the end looks like a little flower, and it uses it to like mop food up off the rock that it can reach, and then it retracts all the way. It can retract really quickly. It kind of rolls itself up within itself to get back into its hole. Peanut worms are cool. They don't throw a web like a vermitid snail does. So if you see a peanut worm, that's awesome. I would say that's like finding a 4-leaf clover in your reef. So go for that. Battle says, are you going to come to Aquafest? I have no plans to go to Louisiana. I'm trying to reduce my trips this year. I traveled so much last year, and I need to stay here at home anyway to just keep up with orders. And I feel like whenever I go on these trips, I'm gone 3 days minimum. And it's like 3 more days I couldn't work. And it's 3 days gone, and the customer waits another 3 days on top of the wait they already had in the schedule. So I'm trying to be better about that, number one. And number two, less travel is good for me. Number three, coronavirus. And number four, there was another reason in my head. It'll come to me in a second. But that's my main reason. I'm trying to, I just found out, who knows, I might be on an emergency trip to see my dad again. He's back in the hospital. So there's a chance that I just can't book up everything. As he's getting older, there might be more times I need to fly out really quick and spend some time with him. And I don't want to lose those, like, I was too busy, I went to Aquafest. Yeah, can't do that. So, thank you, James. I appreciate that. I will stick to my calendar right now. James says Tornado Alley is in Tulsa on April 4th. And I'm speaking of that one, so I'm sticking on my calendar right now. Which, by the way, is my father's birthday. So, you're lucky I didn't say no, James. Let's see. Tornado Alley. Yeah, I'm trying to get this this thing more filled out because I've been really bad about entering this on my calendar, and then I'm like, I know I got something coming up, but I don't remember when. It's really bad. Let's see. Perfect. Done. Thank you very much, James. I appreciate that. Kelly Lutz, I don't know what you're talking about. In unrelated news, there's supposed to be a big reveal in a few days about a new product. Mr. Reef Buster says, are you coming to Reefapalooza New York this year? Same answer as above. Charles says, I want to add another filter to my RODI system. Do I need to do anything with the waistline or not? I want to make sure I hook it up correctly. Okay, you said you want to add a filter. You didn't say you want to add another membrane. If you're adding a membrane, you're going to have to change the way the waistline is. And if you're adding another DI, you don't have to change anything. If you're adding another sediment or carbon, you got to figure out where you're going to put that in line. So I guess I can't really answer your question specifically. I have a bunch of videos on my channel about how to set up RODIs and what to do and how to fix things and how to replace things. So you can watch that. And then BRS has a video specifically showing you how to add a new membrane to an existing RODI system if you're trying to do that. And they explain about the waistline and the connections and everything you need to make that work. Let's see. Someone's reminding me I need to upload a video. Trust me, I'm well aware. Oh, I talked to a pain management doctor earlier this week. One of my friends in Florida referred me to somebody here in Dallas who was asking what's going on with my neck and what can he do to help. And I told him the situation, told him what's going on, and his advice to me, and I'm not saying this facetiously, I don't, I appreciate any advice I get, but his advice based on that phone call was for me to wait another 3 years until what I'm asking for is more common, and then it'll be approved. There is no way I'm going to last 3 years with this pain. But that's a minor update for you guys. Jamie, I'm going to have to read this out loud. That's really funny. I heard a rumor that there's a faster way of becoming a mature reefer. It's called the Mila's Reef weekly live stream. I don't know the science behind it, but I heard it's great. Haha. That's awesome. Oh, yeah. Here's something I can show. Now, it's going to be very blue. But yesterday, Kevin, who came to pick up his order, sent me pictures of how he had installed the Eheim chimney. I keep saying Eheim. The auto feeder chimney in his screened top. So let me find that. Trying to get everything on the screen first. Oh, come on, really? Pivot. All right, hang on. Let me save it to my phone. Okay, so I don't know exactly how the screen top works, so I'm going to kind of assume some things here, but here's the picture. Like I said, it's really blue. So right there is what I think is an opening with a slab of acrylic sitting on top to keep fish from jumping out. And I think what Kevin would do is remove that slab of acrylic, that chunk, and drop in the food and then put it right back in place. So he asked for one of my chimneys and he wanted it to fit into that opening right there. And then he brought it home and it fits perfectly, which made him really, really happy. And so now you can see, it's kind of almost out of the shot at the bottom. The chimney is down in the water, probably a ½ an inch under the water, which is exactly how it's supposed to be. And it can't fall through because of the rim, because of the way it's built. And then here it is with this AFS from Apex sitting on top, which will then push out forward, turn one full rotation, and drop the food in the opening. The only thing that I see on this particular setup is that is actually a portal for a fish to jump out. So it might be worth it, Kevin, for you to put some kind of screen mesh on top of the opening and let the food fall through the mesh. So that way if a fish were to try and jump through the rectangular opening, it's just going to bounce off the mesh and go right back in the water. Because it seems invariably whenever anyone has any kind of a opening, just a sliver, the fish jump through it. And then they land on top of the screen right above the water that keeps them alive, and they can't get back down, and they die. They dry out like a potato chip. It's really sad. That's the worst part about a screen top. You think you've covered every little millimeter, but you haven't. They find one to jump through, and they land on the screen and dry out under the lights. It's the worst. If they just jumped and landed back in the tank, so much better. And I realize if they jump out and hit the floor, yeah, they're miles away from the ocean. But yeah, I would probably try and put some kind of mesh screen on top of that and let the food drizzle through it in that one opening. Since you've meshed everything, that's going to be like this one spot when they look up, they're not going to see a screen. They're going to think that's a way to jump out. Okay. Beth says, is it possible to have a successful reef tank without a sump or a refugium? Yes, it's a little more maintenance. You're going to be doing a lot more hands-on, cleaning, and you would probably have hang-on-back equipment for that reef tank. There's people that do it. I mean, there's people that have like a vase reef, and my friend Felicia did a beautiful one that was featured in Coral Magazine. I don't think it's 6 gallons, and it's got the rock in there, and it's got little corals in there. It's really pretty. And I think she has like an air stone in there and a heater to create the circulation. And she changes water once a week. And what she recently did was she got one of those Camor pumps that has 4 dosing heads. And I think she used 1 or 2 of the heads for an automatic weekly water change on the vase bowl, so she doesn't have to even do that anymore. And then I guess maybe the other 2 are going to like dose alkaline and calcium or something. So it is possible to do it. It's just, I think more and more of us love the automation. And the more gear we can put underneath, the more exciting it is. And I mean, yeah, there's a lot more things that can break and go wrong, but at the same time, it allows us to keep our hands out of the tank more frequently. Michael says, what would you say is better for your fish's health, to feed in larger amounts once a day or smaller time, 2 or 3 times a day, smaller amounts 2 or 3 times a day? I actually like multiple feedings. I think it's great. I was just reading a post today by one guy, and he was posting in Club Miller's Reef, and he was saying how he only feeds his fish once every 3 days, and people hate that. And he's right. I hate that. If he only ate once every 3 days and he fed his fish once every 3 days, I'd say, okay, I get it. Fair enough. That's how you live. You're making your fish live that way. And if he had a dog and he fed his dog every 3 days, and if he had a cat and he fed his cat every 3 days, drives me nuts. I'm sorry. I'm all about feeding the fish. I think fat, healthy fish stay healthy longer. And I think skinny fish, because they're being starved of food, are more prone to get sick. And I just feel like they have a beefier immune system because they're chunky. So, that doesn't mean I'm right. I'm not a marine biologist. I'm just working with what makes sense to me. But I have my tank. This tank gets an auto feeder drop twice a day, and then I feed frozen every single night. And I try to clip a sheet of nori on the glass probably 4 days a week. I really would like to do it 7 days a week, but that's not what's happening. It's about 4 times a week. I feel like people say, well, I don't want to feed the tank that much because I'm worried about nitrate and phosphate. Well, who cares about nitrate and phosphate? Just use something to keep them under control. A lot of tanks are 0 nitrate, 0 phosphate, and they're dealing with dinoflagellates because of a lack of food. So feeding more frequently allows you to feed, feeding less allows you to feed more frequently. So instead of putting in a Thanksgiving dinner in your tank, do a light breakfast. Do a snack time. What do you do with kids? They have breakfast, they have snack time, they have lunch, they have snack time, they have another snack, they have dinner, and then they go to bed. And with our tank, feeding your fish sporadically throughout the day with lots of little bits of food is a great way to avoid polluting the tank, but giving the fish a constant supply of food. And there are certain tanks out there, like the non-photosynthetic tanks, the tanks that don't even use light because the corals don't use it. And those things are being fed all day long with some kind of nutrient-rich food that's either liquid-based or possibly larger portions, such as ghost shrimp, mysid shrimp, plankton-sized foods, calanus from PE mysis. There's all kinds of different foods on the market. Phytoplankton, rotifers, so there's a lot of things that they put in, and it's just like the tank's almost like soupy with food because those corals, that's the only way they can survive, is getting a good meal. So No, I am not a fan of the once a day thing. I'm not even a fan of the once every few days. That just drives me bonkers. Planet 3D says, we're getting loads of Indonesian corals here in the UK. Are you getting the same in your region? It's huge news that Indonesia has opened up and corals are now shipping again. And I've been seeing more and more posts, but it seems to be like the same person sharing. I saw Neptune Systems shared a really good post with a lot of pictures and some video of like hundreds of boxes coming to the United States. Reef Builders had a couple of articles talking about it. There was another guy that posted pictures as well. But I mean, it's like, that right there is 3 people that I saw sharing. So yes, it is open. It's not any corals from the ocean. It's aquacultured corals that were grown in farmhouses, grow houses. And those are what are being shipped over to the US at this time. So it's nice. Will it change the pricing of what corals go for? I have no idea. Probably not. Fellow Reefer says, I have a question about the Neptune solenoid valve and wanted to know if you know how I can program it to open and close depending on the high and the low optical sensor in the RODI system, or RODI reservoir. Yeah, I do. It's a little too complicated to explain here specifically. You're going to need to find the solenoid itself. You're going to name it something like, I don't know what you would call it. Solenoid 1, Sol 1. And then in the sensors, because you have 2 optical sensors, you're going to have some kind of a command that's going to say, if closed, which means the sensor is wet, then it's off. And if open, which means the sensor is dry, you're going to have it on to start adding more water. And then the vice versa for the top sensor. When it gets wet, you want to stop the flow. There's a Neptune group on Facebook where you can ask this, and 10 people are going to answer you within a couple of hours. There's a forum on neptunesystems.com or neptunesys.com. I always forget which one it is. And they have a community forum there where they've answered everything under the sun, and probably the question you're asking has been asked and answered already, and you can read the answers right there on their forum. So I would check those for some assistance. And thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. Brandon says, I'm hoping to set up my first tank, a 75-gallon, in a few months. I want to start with a tang, a yellow or maybe a hippo, or 2 for the first fish. What are your thoughts on their needs for space in my tank? If they're tiny little tangs, I have no problem with that at all. These tangs are going to grow, they're going to get bigger, and they're going to need more space. And the common rule of thumb with tangs is bigger tanks are better. So the hippo tangs, you can get those things like an inch, inch and a half, 2 inches long. They're adorable, and you can enjoy it in your 75-gallon for a couple of years before it starts to get too big. A 75-gallon tank is basically 4 feet long. A lot of people that own tanks have 6-foot-long tanks. My tank behind me is 7 feet long, and I have 5 tanks, and I don't want to add any more. So that is kind of my answer there. I'm not saying you can't have them because I get the desire. I have a small hippo in my anemone cube that some people have been asking me repeatedly, when are you getting it out of that tank? And I haven't moved it yet. But for the most part, they do need open water to swim in. And so planning ahead for what will be your next tank size would be a good husbandry move. You're deciding ahead. I know that my hippo tank will be moved, and I know it's going into a different tank. So I'm not sweating it. I just haven't tried to catch her yet. I don't know if she's going to want me to catch her. She's pretty skittish. But a hippo is kind of a common choice. The yellow is a little bit bigger fish because of the dorsal fin. It kind of resembles the sailfin tang somewhat, even though sailfin tangs get monstrous. Don't get that. Don't get that for a 75. Dennis says, when should I turn on a skimmer on a new tank? What about adding refugium? Before, during, or after the cycle? The tank should cycle. All we're talking about is saltwater, sand, rock, time. That's it. And you're going to have to put something in there to start the cycle. I say use raw shrimp. Back in the day, people would put in a damsel. Some people will just use liquid ammonia. However you want to do it. And then after the cycle is done, then you skim. If you run the skimmer before then, you're skimming out the cycle, which means you'll never cycle. And running the skimmer without the collection cup is what a lot of people do. Just don't do it. Leave the skimmer off. When it's time to run the skimmer, turn it on. So go the 3 weeks or go a month. Once the cycle's completed, you've seen your ammonia nitrate spike happen and fall, rise and fall, rise and fall, rise and fall. Then turn on your protein skimmer, do a water change, and now you're ready to start adding some livestock. After about 3 months, then I would add the refugium, because now there's some life, because you put some fish, some corals, some cleanup crews, some bugs into the tank, and now the refugium has some nutrients to work with. I see a lot of people that have this big refugium, and there's like this little ball of algae, and it's kind of like just sitting there like a kitchen pot scrubby. And I'm like, that's nothing. You need plants, you know. But you need nutrients to support it too. And in these tanks that are suffering with a lack of nutrients, a lack of nitrate, a lack of phosphate, and even the appearance of dinoflagellates, the refugium is probably going to do nothing, or even decay and add to the nutrient problem. I mean, the dinoflagellate problem. So that's my recommendation. Devin says, would you recommend the Hanna pH checker? That is one I haven't tried. I love the Hanna alkalinity checker. That thing is hands down perfect. However, there is a limit in case this matters to you. It only measures up to 20 DKH. So if you were trying to measure like how strong is your DIY alkaline solution, you can't. If you were trying to measure the effluent coming out of a calcium reactor, you can't. The numbers are just too high for that. It's out of its range. So, but if you're looking for normal alkalinity measurements, somewhere between 6 and 11. I mean, we want it between 8 and 11, but some people run lower, 6.5, 7, or they accidentally drop down to 6. That's what I'm saying. It can measure lower. That one is a good one. It's really easy. It's super fast. It's a great one. The phosphate checker is the next one I like. I've heard nothing but negative negative comments from people about the calcium one. It's too complicated. And I don't know that one's gotten any better. When I opened the kit and looked in there, I was like, wow. And even I was intimidated. I was like, this one looks like a lot of work. So I haven't tried the pH one. I really like the American Pinpoint pH probe. And basically you have a thing that's the size of your phone but a little thicker. And you have a probe and you can put it in your tank. You can put it in your barrel of salt water. You could put it in your RODI water if you wanted, but there's no point. Why would you ever do that? But no, it's great for measuring. It's also good for measuring the pH in a bag of a fish you just brought home to see what the level is. Whether it was shipped to you or picked up at the fish store, you can check the pH of the water there. I loved the ability, and especially if you have multiple tanks, you can check the 29-gallon, check the 55-gallon, check the 400-gallon, check the 60-gallon, and you can just see what the pH is in all your tanks. So American Pinpoint makes a great pH meter. It's not a single probe. It's an actual probe with a wire that goes to a meter that has a 9-volt battery in it. And I don't know what those cost, 80, 90 bucks. But it's great. And you can leave it hooked up to the tank all the time if you want. You can set it up nearby or Velcro it to something where it's really going to hold. Don't let it fall off. And you can check on your tank multiple times a day and see what the pH is at night, what it is first thing in the morning, what it is in the middle of the afternoon. It's great. Estonian says, have you ever kept a 6-line wrasse? If so, then what's your experience with this species? I'm thinking about keeping one in my 40-gallon. I did. I had a 6-line wrasse. His name was Spike, and he was kind of aggressive. The 6-line wrasse is probably the most aggressive of the lined wrasses. A lot of people like the 4-line or the 8-line because they're more timid. So if you're wanting a fish that's kind of a pain in the butt that chases your fish around the tank, the 6-line probably is going to do it. It's not absolutely for sure, but there's a good chance it's going to happen. Eric says, I've had a rose bubble tip anemone in my tank now for about a month. The other anemones and softies are all thriving, but the rose seems to be receding more often than not. I think you should run some carbon and see if that helps. You want a half a cup of carbon per 50 gallons of water, and you put that in a reactor, not just in a sock or not inside a mesh bag lying in the bottom of the sump or in some little shelf in the back. I mean, put it in like a Two Little Fishies Fosman reactor, fill it up with the right amount of carbon, rinse it really well before you hook it up to the tank, and then just let that process the water and see if the anemone starts to perk up. You may need to actually manually feed that anemone a few times to kind of help it strengthen. Hopefully it's still sticky. Hopefully it's not getting beat up by a clownfish. That can happen too. But I would try carbon first. Steven says, I have a system with about a 60-gallon water volume. What sort of nitrate spike could one see from the death of a large trochus snail? I had a spike recently from 20 ppm to 100 ppm. Well, I don't know that one single snail could do that, especially in 60 gallons of water. But I guess if it died and rotted away and you didn't remove it, it's a possibility. But I would think your cleanup crew and your bristleworms would just devour the meaty stuff. But that's a crazy number. Unfortunately, it's a high number. You do need to bring it down. I don't know if it's come back down on its own or not, or even if it was a faulty test. But if you do a 30-gallon water change on your 60-gallon tank, you'll go from 100 back to 50. And you do another 50% water change, you'll get it down to 25. So I would check again. I would test again and see what's going on. But I feel like more than one snail died to cause that kind of a jump. Crazy Lynn says, I have a 10-gallon tank that's got high nitrites, and I posted in the group, many suggested adding Dr. Tim's. Yeah, they're trying to use bacteria to bump it from nitrite to nitrate. I got the 4-ounce bottle. I know it says you can't overdose, but how much should I add? I don't know the answer, I'm sorry. I haven't used Dr. Tim's personally, but odds are the people in the group will be able to give you a recipe, or maybe you can contact the company directly and see what they recommend. I realize it's the weekend, but maybe they have an email and they'll email you back. But I don't know the answer myself. Ha! Sweaty says, I just gave my tank a piece of banana and the tangs swarmed it. It's pretty cool to watch. Yeah, I like to take some banana, just the tip, break it off, and mash it up in your fingers in the water and let the little pieces go flying, and you'll see a lot of your fish will devour it. It's very interesting. I don't do it very often. It's the occasional treat. WVU says, can you fuel Prodibio Biodigest just off biopellets? I don't know if there's a typo in there or not. You can definitely run biopellets with Prodibio, but I did discover that it's possible to overdose when you're running biopellets. So keep that in mind. I did a whole video about it at MACNA, so it's on my YouTube channel. It's about an hour long. And Alex has to, oh, here we go, thank you. I was like, what did he say? Is it best to get rid of cyano right away or wait it out to see if it goes away on its own? Love your channel. Get rid of it. Get rid of it right away because it's ugly. And the longer you look at it, the more you're going to hate your tank. And the more you hate your tank, the less maintenance you're going to do. Red Cyano RX is on my website. I can ship it to you for $6 and it will get rid of the problem within a week. So just use it, be done, move on with your life. There's absolutely no reason to try and wait it out and wait weeks or months. And then finally you're going to say, okay, you know what? I've waited all this time. I'm sick of it. Let me try Red Cyano RX. And then a week later, like, God, I should have done this 6 months ago. Yes. Just handle it when you see it. I don't like to let that stuff get out of control. I haven't had to treat this tank for cyanobacteria in a very long time. But if I did, I would treat the tank. If it was in there and it was bothering me, I would treat. I would not wait it out. And I like to treat it while it's early before it's gone everywhere. So if it's starting to show up, it's like, all right, it's time to treat. And if you have to use it once or twice a year, so be it. It's nothing wrong with that. Wow, we had a big number of people. Andrea, she wrote this a while back. 342 people were on. Right now we're at 323. That's probably our highest number yet, I believe, on the live stream. Oh, that's so awesome. GTA says, I got a bunch of snails today with live barnacles on them. Should I remove them? No, they're awesome. Enjoy. That's really cool. I got this really pretty snail once called a wavy turban snail. It's on my Critter ID page, and he had barnacles on his shell. And he was really cool. He was big. It was like this big around the base of the shell, and it came to a point. And he was very colorful. and he had all his barnacles, and he was gorgeous. I just took so many pictures of him. And I put him in the tank, and the edge of his shell was ruffled like a dress all the way around. It was really cool. And I don't think it does well in I think our tank temperature is too warm for long term. But man, was it a beautiful snail. And I wouldn't mind having a couple more of those in my reef to this day. I'd have to double check. Derby City asks a great question. I got a TDS meter today, and my RO water is 2. My RODI water, well, he says RO, but it's probably RODI. But it's 495 my top-off container. What would be causing this? You need to clean your container. So you're going to drain the container, whether it's a barrel or an acrylic box or a jug or a bucket. You're going to clean it with bleach and water. 10 parts water to 1 part bleach. Scrub it down if you can get your hand in there. If not, shake the bleach water around like crazy. Like if it's a jug with a lid, you can put in, well, 10 to 1, but it could be like a quart worth of total liquid and shake that around in the jug everywhere for a couple of minutes, maybe a minute. It's probably enough. And that'll basically disinfect. And then you can remove the lid, and you can take a garden hose to it, and you can blast it really good, to rinse it really good to get all of that bleach out of there, and then leave it outside to air out for 24 hours. If you can, turn it upside down and just let the sun hit it, and just let it just get hit with air, because the sunlight and the air will dissipate any possible last bits of chlorine in the container, and now you can refill it. Also, if you have a pump in there with tubing, which you probably do because it's a top off, clean the pump, clean the tubing. You want everything to be pristine when you put it back in and start fresh. It sounds to me like the container is either leaching stuff into the water. And there was a guy here in my local area who had one of my RODI systems, and he says, Mark, I don't know what's wrong with the system. I bought it from you and it's coming out 80. And I just said, and he was nearby. He was down the street, and I said, I'm on my way. And I took the tube out of the barrel, and I said, give me a clean cup, and he gave me a clean drinking glass, and I put the tube in there, I put the meter in, and it said 0. He goes, well, that's not possible. And he said, put the meter in the barrel, and it was 80. I said, your barrel's dirty. So he did exactly what I told him. He did the bleach water, he scrubbed the walls of it, he let it air out, he refilled it, he measured it, it was 0 again. Also, you need to cover your container. So if your container is open, like maybe it's a glass aquarium, and it's just open, DI water is so pure, it grabs ions from the air. It is screaming for ions because it's ion free. And it's going to grab everything it can, and it will actually pollute itself through sort of like magnetically. So you want to make sure it's completely covered and sealed. I mean, there can be a little bit of space around it where the tubing comes out, 1/8 of an inch, so it can breathe a fraction. But that's it. You don't want to have it with so tight that it's actually creating a vacuum on your reservoir. But if you clean it really good, you'll see this number come down, and I guarantee you this is going to work. Glenn Smith, can you tell us how the Ecotech doser is performing, as I hope to get one in spring? Yeah, of course. I'll definitely update you guys. MTX says, can I scrape pallies off of a rock with a razor blade that my long tentacle anemone is sitting on top of? I can remove the rock, just don't want some of the pallies to die in the tank. You know what you need? You need my work tray. And that's an acrylic tray I make that fits on the top of your tank. You just cut a couple of pieces of PVC pipe the right length to span your tank, and you put the tray on there. You can take the rock right on top of the tray with the anemone and the pallies, and you wear protective eye protection, you wear gloves, you don't keep your mouth open, and you can scrape off the pallies, and you put the rock back in the water and put it back on the tray so it kind of stays wet and doesn't have a chance to dry out, and give that anemone a second chance to breathe some salt water. And you can just work that rock and then put it back inside your tank. You can do whatever you want to use to do this. I just make a tray, but I mean, you can rig something else. But you can work over the tank, and whatever you're scraping off will fall into the tray. Dwayvik, I think I'm saying that right, says, I grilled out, I ate, I took a power nap, I showered, I came back, and the live stream is still going. It's funny. Thank you, Rocket Family. Let's mention that now. Today is Water Test Saturday. I say this every single week because I mean it. Every Saturday I test my water. I add my results to Reef Trace, which is an app that works for iOS and Android. So if you don't have it, get it. And if you do have it, use it. And if you have test kits, use them. Don't be lazy. Let's throw Jake under the bus for a second. Don't be like Jake Adams. Test your water. I have no idea if he tests or not. I'm assuming he does. But no, test your water. Test your water. Test your alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, phosphates, nitrates, salinity, temperature, pH. Measure it all. Write it down. Log it in an app, and keep up with it. And make any minor adjustments you need on your system. Check your dosing pumps. Check the tubing coming from and to the dosing pump to make sure they're not clogged, they're not sucking in air, that everything's working correctly. And like I said, if you have to make an adjustment, do it. But don't not do it. That's the worst part. You guys buy these test kits because you know you need to test, and in the beginning you test like crazy, and then you're sick of it. Oh, also, in Club Miller's Reef, I shared a link to one of those magnetic stirrers that is battery powered. And it was like $30, which is a great price. And it will measure, you can put in your regular test kit stuff into it. It's got a magnetic bead that spins. It's just like the one I have that's 3D printed, but it's available. And I've been referring everyone to this company. I'm sure that company is very happy to see a bunch of those being sold all of a sudden. I keep waiting for an email to show up saying, thanks, Mark. But yeah, I mean, that thing is awesome. It's why I don't mind testing, because I'm not standing there shaking a glass vial. It's really annoying. And that just makes it so simple and easy to do. Fishy Business says, I'm starting a new 120-gallon tank. At what point should I turn on the algae turf scrubber? I would wait until the cycle is done and get some livestock in there, because with zero nutrients, how are you going to grow algae in a turf scrubber? You need something in there for it to work on. And then it's going to take a few weeks. I was also told by Foursquare Aquatics that you want to seed your turf scrubber with algae from someone else's turf scrubber. So if you know someone that has a turf scrubber, you grab some of their crap that's on theirs, and you rub it into your screen, and then you put it inside your turf scrubber, and that kind of gets it going. Mr. Reef Buster says, can I add 10 pounds of live sand to my 22-gallon nano in one shot, or should it be done slowly? It currently has a 2-inch sand bed and just finished cycling. You want to add a ½ an inch of sand, whatever that is. I don't know how many pounds it's going to equal to, but if you put too much sand on top, then all the life in your sand bed now will be smothered and die, and you're going to have to seed it with new. So even though you're buying a bag of live sand, so technically it's okay, just go a ½ an inch, and then a week from now add another ½ inch or whatever it is to use up this full 10 pounds. Just kind of see, you don't want to put too much at once. Cordell says, why not put the Hippo in the 400-gallon? I don't want it in the 400-gallon. I have 5 tangs in there. I want to put it in the frag system. The Hippo tangs have they're well known for nipping on zoanthids, and I don't need to see that again. I've seen it in the past. I'm not going to see it twice. Lamont says, my fire shrimp ate a piece of banana. Wow! Mr. Reef Buster says, is there a negative side effect of putting too much carbon in the tank? Yes, if you use too much, it can lead to problems, especially with tangs. It can release too much carbon fines into the water. We want to use the right amount. Just like we want to use the right amount of salt, we want to use the right amount of alkalinity, the right amount of calcium, everything within reason. So if your tank, well, whatever your tank size is, it's a ½ a cup of carbon per 50 gallons. Just figure out the math. And that way you're not wasting any and you're not overdoing anything. You could literally, if you put in like a buttload of carbon in your tank, you could strip it so clean so fast, it could actually affect things detrimentally. I know, Tim. I've got to do that like today or tomorrow. I've been wanting to get that mixing station, and another week has gone by and it's not done. I need to get it done because I need salt water for when the vet gets here, so she has salt water to work with. And yeah, I need to like get on that now. David says, what snails do you prefer to take care of GHA? or green hair algae. The best one is Trochus. And the reason the Trochus is so popular is when it flips upside down, it can get back on its foot. Astrias, when they fall on their back, they die. I mean, they don't necessarily die just from being on their back, even though technically they can, but because they're like ready for a fish to prey on them, or hermit crabs. So when they're flat on their back, you have to flip them back over. And flipping over astrias every single day is kind of annoying. Even if it's just 3 or 4, it's like, God, there's another one. Flip. And you're getting your Kent scraper, or you're using an acrylic rod or something to flip the snail over. And I wondered, where do these dumb snails come from our ocean, where they, when they're on their back, they're screwed? And from what I've heard, that the ocean, because it's rocking, it rocks these back and forth and they can flip. But in our tanks, we don't have that rocking motion, and so it just lies there, and you have to rescue it. So Trochus can be right side up. The huge Mexican turbo snails, the big ones, those guys eat hair algae. The sea hare eats algae. The diadema urchin eats algae. The tuxedo urchin eats algae. Hermit crabs work on algae, so don't neglect hermit crabs. The blue-legged hermit crabs are the most popular sold hermit crab, and they are the most aggressive. So I always tell people to buy red-leg hermit crabs. And I have an article on my website. It's just milasreef.com/CUC, Clean Up Crew. And if you just go there, there's a whole bunch of pictures, and it shows all the creatures that I recommend for a cleanup crew. Jamie says, how do I like the video? I can never find it. When you're watching the live stream, you have to exit the live chat for a second. Then you can like the video itself, and then you can come right back to the live stream chat. That's how I figured it out on my phone when I was on someone else's channel. So I didn't memorize it, but that's pretty much how I did it. I just exited out of chat, did my thing, came right back in. GTA says, what's the best glue or epoxy to secure cut frags to the rock in the tank? I really like the glue from Polyp Labs, and I think it's just called Coral Glue. Another one that I've used for a long time is CG, which is Coral Glue, from Ecotech. Both of those work really, really well for gluing down corals to rocks. And the reason I like the Polyp Labs one is it's a really small little tube. You get like 2 or 3 or maybe 4 frags out of a tube. And you can take the tube and just stick it in the water and squeeze it on the rock. Or, my preference, get the rock out of the water, dry off the spot, dry off the frag, put the glue, hold it for 60 seconds, and put the rock back. I mean, just depends what you're able to do. Sometimes people might even do it during the middle of a water change. While the water's down, they have an exposed piece of rock, they can glue the coral in place and then add the salt water back. And then after holding it for like a minute, then, remove your hand and give it a few minutes to rest, and then take your hand and kind of wave it back and forth and see if it makes the coral fall over or if it stays. And if it stays, you're good to go. If it flops, you got to glue it again. And then the putty, I really like DD Aquascape putty. And I don't sell it, but I love it. I wish I could sell it because I really love it. And I've been using that stuff for at least a decade, maybe longer. It's coralline pink in color. They sell a gray one. Don't buy that one. Buy the pink one, so it'll look like coralline. And I love that one. That one's great. Tim says, what do you think of the Tulo Fishies Sea Elements product? I haven't used it. Mike, yes, send me a picture. Send me a picture of this ugly hitchhiker critter. Send it to sales@milasreef.com. Tim says, would you share some of your Trident data with us on a stream sometime? Have you had any issues of concern, or is it pretty smooth? Yeah, I mean, let's see what I can show you right now. But yeah, I guess it'd be probably better as a full-on video. Let's see. So we're going to go down to Trident. Here's my Trident right now. Good, there's not bad numbers. Whew! And so when I tap that, I can now see the graphs underneath. And the graphs are very misleading, so don't get all hyped up about that. But you can see alkalinity is 9.17, calcium is 422, magnesium is 1460. If I touch a graph, it will then open up a graph, and then I can turn my phone sideways, and we can see the graph itself. This is for the last week. And at the very bottom, it says the minimum was 8.72, the maximum was 9.23, and the average was 9.03. Now I have the ability to hit compare and then scroll all the way down to the very bottom. I wish it was at the top, but it's at the bottom. I can add calcium, and I can add magnesium, And then I hit this again. Nope, I'm sorry. I need to get to the, oh, I think there we go. And now you've got all three graphs on there. Do we have all three? Yes, we do. So now you can see the alkaline, the calcium, the magnesium numbers for over the last week. The low of the calcium was 411, the high was 432. The magnesium was 1460, 1467.21, 1471. So there was a slight rise in magnesium this week, but just a hair. I mean, we're talking about a difference of 11 points. And calcium was a difference of 21 points, and alkalinity was a difference of 0.5 DKH over the entire week. Had a serious dip right there. You can also look at things, I'm showing you a week. We can go to 1 day's worth and see what happened on that particular day. So there it was showing during that 1 day, it was 8.93 to 9.23. And you can even go to 1 hour. And then you can see over 1 hour, alkalinity was 9.17 to 9.17. There was no change because it was all in the same hour. And then, of course, when you are looking at your large graph, at the top here, you can move this slider to a previous date. And the date is updating to back on January 26th to February 2nd. And there was my numbers back then. So I hope you found that interesting. But no, it runs all the time. Oh, I didn't show you this. Dang it. Hang on, one more thing to show you. We'll go back to the app. And we'll go here. Go back to Trident. So another thing that the Trident does, I showed you the graphs. Then if you tap it again, it shows you how much of the reagents are left in each bottle. And it shows 50%, 54, and 54. And if I touch it one more time, it shows I have 65 tests of A left, 71 of B, and 70 of C. So that's kind of nice. Alrighty. You guys and you're always watching the clock. How are we doing? Oh, we still have 4 minutes left on this stream. What are you talking about? Kurt says, I almost finished building a stand for my 120 gallon as long as the stream has been running. Let's see. Jamie says, have you ever done a video on Reef Trace and all of its features? And if not, you should consider. Yes, you're right. I've talked with Jose about that a few times. I keep wanting, every single time I think about doing it, he says, we have another update coming out. It's going to be even better. So I've kind of drug my feet on that one because it's always a change. And if I show you how it is now and then it's different, you're like, hey, that's not what it looks like. Why isn't it the same? Why did he tell us that? So that's one reason. It's not a great reason, but it's a real reason. But no, I do see one happening this year where I can kind of showcase it. I mean, why not? Everyone else does a video about apps. I don't know. I'm still trying to get Tammy's video out, the calcium reactor video out, the Clarisy video out, the Reef Bright Light video out. I mean, I got so many things to show you guys. I just need hours in the day. I got Dubai to show you. I got my Fiji trip to show you, my Bonaire trip to show you. I've noticed when I sit at my computer now, I'm getting this horrible pain back here that it's more when I'm sitting. And I keep trying to figure out if it's the position I'm in or if it's the angle of the chair. I don't know. It's been bad. So that's why I love standing during these live streams. Tim says, have you ever wondered or asked Neptune Systems why they don't have lights of their own? You know what? Could be happening. You never know. I mean, you literally don't know. And there's a good chance they're working on one right now. I see Ed is here. I'm near the bottom of the chat. We did it. We did it in less than 3 hours. Luke says, can I add a yellow tang and a purple tang to the same reef tank? Will they fight or will they get along? They may fight. If you're adding them both at the same time, they may get along. But the purple one will probably be the more aggressive of the two. Be nice if you got a couple of juveniles, honestly. Mr. Reef Buster says, what are your thoughts on the Reef Bot? Is it worth the hype or should we wait and see how it does long term? It's been out for a few years, actually. It's been on display at Magna for a few years. They keep enhancing it, making it better. And I think it's probably a solid unit. And the thing is, you get to use your own test kits with it, apparently. As long as the test kit is all liquid and no powders, you can use it in the ReefBot. So if you had an all liquid test like API for nitrate, you could do that in the ReefBot. If you had a phosphate test that's all liquid like ELOS, you can use that in the ReefBot. So if you had the Trident testing alkaline, magnesium, and calcium, and had the ReefBot doing nitrate and phosphate, you have the Apex doing pH and temperature and ORP, kind of covered almost everything we usually test. You can even add ammonia to the ReefBot just as a safety precaution that if ammonia starts to rise in your tank, you get a notification. So that might be the one vial you want to always keep is ammonia. Just a thought. GTA says, should the water test be done before or after the water change? I test my tank every Saturday or Sunday and also a water change every Saturday or Sunday. Well, I kind of like the idea of testing the water. Okay, so that's going to make us go over 3 hours. Look what you just did. If you test your water before the water change, you know the condition of the tank. And you know when you do your water change, it's going to get better because you just put in nice, clean water, right? However, and so the other benefit is if you test the water in the tank and you test the water in your new barrel, you can make sure they match. If you want to test your water after the water change, then you really don't have a comparison and you may be putting in water that is vastly different from your reef. The salinity could be different, the alkalinity could be different, the magnesium could be different. You know, it could be crazy high. So it's really good to test your tank and then make the adjustments. Do the water change, adjust the dosers. So that would be my recommendation. Test the tank every Saturday no matter what. Do your water change later that day or later that night. And whenever you mix a brand new batch of salt, you know, you open up the bucket for the first time, the bag for the first time, the box for the first time, whatever you're using, test that water with your test kits and make sure that everything's right so when you are going to do your water change, they match. If the water is vastly different, you're going to have to actually buffer up the salt water that's about to go in your tank. You have to buffer it before it's ready to go in the tank because something's not right. So definitely test don't just trust it. Oh, I used a half scoop per gallon and it's always fine. Like that's a terrible answer. And people have lost tanks over those kind of mistakes. Yob K says, did you ever try the same water sample on 2 different Trident systems to see if you get the same results? No, I only have 1 Trident. And I also don't take a Trident and move it from tank to tank. It just tests the 1 tank and that's the end of it. Jason says, have you ever thought about doing your live streams on tour? Maybe do a live stream from Tammy's Reef that we don't have to make the update video. Actually, we would. Because, and I hate to say it, but the tank is gone. But no, I like the idea. As long as we have a nice, strong bandwidth, that's what matters most. I see a lot of people live streaming from club events or from, you know, like Worldwide Corals or whatever, and the bandwidth is garbage. And the pictures come out, you know, the videos are pixelated. It's shot vertical. It's everything I hate in life. And my friend Jerry works for Reefing out of Utah, and he owns it. And he set up one of these amazing, huge, I forget what it is, 17,000 gallon systems in a sporting goods store called Shields. And they've put up like 9 of these tanks so far. And he loves to live stream to Facebook. And he would do it vertically, oh well. But it was terrible. And it would freeze, and it would be blurry, and then finally it would focus for a minute, and it would be blurry. And I said to him, Jerry, could you just do it, film it, and then upload the HD for us later instead of doing it live? I get the desire for live, but if it's coming through garbage, it kills it for me. It just does. And he watched the stream later and goes, oh my God, Mark, I had no idea. Yeah, I'm going back tomorrow. I'm going to film it. Because he was like, look how beautiful this tank is. And oh my God, look, isn't that a great looking fish? And all it was pixels. And I was like, oh. And then he went into the filtration room, which was like a bunker of concrete, and even lost the signal again. I was like, see? If you just filmed it and narrated what you're looking at and then uploaded that later, we'd see it in HD and we'd be really happy and very impressed. So that's what I recommend people do. And so yeah, if I can live stream from like Mackinac, I would love to if I had a good solid signal. Invariably we don't, which is why I film so many things, but then my schedule's so full because I'm trying to take care of my customers that I don't have the time to just sit at the computer and edit videos like you guys want me to. But it doesn't mean I don't care or that I don't want to. I keep trying, but I got to put the customers first because that's what pays the bills and keeps the roof over my head. Guys, I'm going to end it here. Thank you so much for tuning in. We still have 300 people on here. We're 3 hours and 4 minutes in. I believe this was live stream 115. That means there's 114 other live streams that you never heard before because you were brand new to the channel and you made it through 3 hours of this insanity. Thank you for tuning in. Please join Club Miller's Reef if you haven't. I did that specific. I know it's on Facebook, but I did it for you guys on YouTube so we could interact all throughout the week. So please do join. It's facebook.com/groups/Mila's Reef. And there is the link. There, whoop, that's not it. And there is the graphic. And again, if you haven't shopped for my website, I always appreciate it if you would. And last year, I was able to hit 1,000 customers for the year. This year, at least as of right now, it looks like I can do it again, which would be great. I appreciate all the business you guys throw my way, and I love offering the knowledge I have to help you with your reef tanks. And so I know a lot of you guys are almost doing me a favor buying from me because you're kind of repaying me for knowledge, and that's fine. That's fine. Give and take. I get it. So let me get off of here. I'm going to go exercise. We still have some sunlight at 64 degrees, and I'm closing my circles every day of the month on my Apple Watch so I can get an award for February, and I got to go. Bye, guys.